King of France. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76. Is this blood really so pure? July 16th, Louis V and Queen Marie took a carriage to the Paris City Hall. The king's trip was mainly to show the Parisians his attitude of accepting the revolution. In order to show that he stood with the masses, the king did not wear a gorgeous dress, but dressed like a clerk of the Paris city government. It is hard to imagine that just a few days ago, he was still a tough king who wanted to forcibly expel the National Assembly with the force of the Swiss Legion. But Queen Marie still went out in a gorgeous dress, with layers of lace and gold threads wrapped around. The newly established members of the Paris Public Architects and senior officers of the National Guard welcomed Louis V at the Paris City Hall. Ning, a lieutenant, mixed in with a group of colonels, had to stand in the front row, next to Lafayette. After all, he was the savior of the Parliament and the man who kicked open the Bastille and was famous. In fact, if Ning chose himself, he would like to hide in the back. Louis V entered the hall of the City Hall and exchanged greetings with the municipal officials represented by Bailey. Then Lafayette stepped forward and personally pinned a tricolor round badge on Louis V's boat hat. Louis V forced a smile and said to the leaders present, "Long live the people." And Ning was shocked. He didn't expect that the words "Long live the people" would come out of the mouth of a "Long live the Lord." It seems that Louis V has been completely overwhelmed by the momentum of the revolution and decided to compromise with the revolutionaries. When Louis V shouted "Long live the people," and Ning saw Queen Marie rolled her eyes. After Lafayette returned to the ranks of the officers of the Self-Guards, the current mayor of Paris, Bailey, said to Louis V, "The City Hall is preparing to mobilize the people to demolish the Bastille to vent the people's negative emotions towards the fortress." Louis V waved his hand and said, "Tear it down, tear it down. I signed an order yesterday to abolish the Bastille royal prison. The castle is now just an ordinary castle." After that, Louis V sighed, "I'm a little tired, so I'll go back to the Palace of Versailles first." He turned and walked towards the door of the City Hall, and Queen Marie immediately followed him. Until the end, the Queen was still releasing her hostility to Ning. And Ning had to work hard to pretend that she didn't notice. A large number of people had gathered in the square outside the City Hall. The King and Queen got on the carriage and waved to the crowd through the small window of the carriage. At this time, someone shouted, "Long live your Majesty!" Then the sparse voice of Long Live rang out. Suddenly, there was another more powerful voice shouting, "Long live freedom!" So the people shouted in unison, "Long live!" The deafening response was completely different from the situation where there were few people who responded to the shouting of "Long live His Majesty" just now. Louis V, who heard all this, had a bitter face. The coachman waved his whip, and the carriage with the royal emblem slowly drove away from the town hall square. The next day, Ning just arrived at the royal conference hall of the Palace of Versailles, and heard passionate voices coming from the conference hall. He entered the conference hall and saw a representative wearing a silver cloak making an impassioned speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, the violence has gotten out of control. On the day of the revolution, the people executed the Marquis de Launay without trial. The mayor of Paris was also lynched without trial that day. He was just appointed as mayor by His Majesty the King on July 11th, and he has not done anything since he took the position. Gentlemen, put yourself in their shoes. Think about the violence happening to you. Don't think this is nonsense. The furious people are blind. They can kill these innocent people without hesitation. We must stop this movement and stop this so-called revolution before more innocent people die. Otherwise, there will be no good gentlemen left in this country soon." And Ning frowned. He was at the scene when Marquis de Launay was executed. Theoretically, Ning could have prevented the lynching, but he considered that Marquis de Launay died after the Bastille was breached in history, so he chose to maintain the original trajectory of history. To be honest, when Marquis de Launay was executed, the scene was indeed a bit bloody, and people couldn't help but sympathize with the Marquis. While the noble continued to talk, Ning found his companions and asked, "Who is this person?" "Danton, I don't know, he seems to be a country noble." "Robespierre, he obviously wants to rouse our sympathy and make us oppose the revolution through the experience of Marquis de Launay. How is this possible?" Ning, then stand up and refute him. "Danton, shouldn't you do it? You are the one who broke into the Bastille, you were there. Quick, Stand up and tell everyone that the Marquis de Launay deserves it. And Ning thought to herself, what the hell am I talking about? I want to reduce my influence now. How can you become a wall by sitting on the fence? Before Ning could speak, someone suddenly slammed the table and interrupted the noble's speech. Enough. I've had enough of this kind of fallacy. And Ning squinted and looked at the person who stood up, and found that she didn't know this guy. Danton said, oh, it's Barnave. He is a very good lawyer and has won many cases. Lawyer Barnave said angrily, you portrayed those who were lynched as good people, innocent people, and portrayed the people who executed them as villains. But, let me ask you, is this blood really so pure? Don't they have any guilt at all? No. At least as far as I know, Marquis de Launay killed hundreds of civilians, including children and women. If you don't believe me, we can ask Mr. Frost who was at the scene at the time. And Ning was stunned. Ah. Don't cue me. I don't want to be the focus now. Barnave turned his head and looked at Ning. Mr. Frost, tell us, how many people died in the Bastille that day? Ning, a lot of people died. There was a river of blood in the Bastille. But most of them were men. I didn't see any women killed in the battle. Barnave, whether there are women or not. Anyway, the defenders killed a large number of civilians. As the commander of the defenders, shouldn't Marquis de Launay pay the corresponding price? And the former mayor of Paris, he was executed because he deliberately delayed the distribution of weapons, and the people suspected that he wanted to stop the revolution. So you see, they all deserve it. The corners of the mouth of the nobleman who was speaking on the stage twitched, but he couldn't squeeze out any words of rebuttal. But Barnave changed the subject. However, the city order in Paris is now out of control, with looting and arson everywhere. We should indeed stop the people's radical behavior as soon as possible. We urgently need General Lafayette to take resolute measures to restore order in Paris. Lafayette, I have ordered the National Guard to maintain order in the city. But the National Guard alone is not enough. The Parliament should pass a programmatic document as soon as possible that actually recognizes the Enlightenment and can serve as the basic principle of constitution making. And Ning thought to himself, no, it is actually very simple to appease the people. Just crack down on profiteers who hoard goods and make the people able to afford bread. But he didn't say anything. After all, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen is also very important. It can be said to be the general program of the entire French Revolution. After Lafayette finished speaking, Mirabeau stood up and said, I think we should start drafting programmatic documents as soon as possible. This is the most important thing now. Chapter 77 August Decree. In the next few days, the contents of the National Assembly were quite boring to Ning. He didn't really care about the principles on which the French Constitution was formulated, but he had to pretend to care when he was in the Parliament. To be honest, this was much more tiring than he had imagined. It was okay to meet representatives with sharp speeches, and you could listen to their impassioned speeches, but it would be very drowsy to meet those who were not good at speaking. What Ning didn't expect was that Robespierre was also the kind of person who made people sleepy. To say that he was quite talkative when chatting with him, he stuttered as soon as he got on stage. Robespierre was also stubborn. After his first speech failed, he went up to give a speech again the next day. He seemed to be so determined that he had to overcome the difficulty of speech. And Ning watched all this from the side, thinking that if Robespierre was a beautiful girl, he would probably have to enter the speech training branch plot. Unfortunately, he was not. He was a 7-foot-tall man from Arras, and he always wore the same green coat. And Ning estimated that Robespierre's green coat would be a holy relic in the Holy Grail War. In addition to the meetings these days, and Ning also had an additional task, which was to train the artillery of the National Guard. Lafayette gave Ning about 200 people, equipped with 20 cannons collected from various arsenals in the city. These 20 cannons have various calibers, including infantry cannons and cavalry cannons. Fortunately, the caliber requirements for the shells fired by the cannons are not strict now, otherwise they would be dragged down by logistics in a real battle. And Ning could only choose 6 8-pound cannons from the 20 cannons and form a unit around these 6 cannons. In addition, Lafayette did not assign Ning a station, so Ning had to go to the Duke of Telestal and ask the Duke for a manor as the station for his small artillery unit. The manor is located in the suburbs of Paris, right on the road from Paris to Versailles. With equipment and a station, this small artillery unit finally looks a bit decent, but it's just a bit decent. The only difference between Ning's small unit and the mob is that they can at least stand in a crooked formation. When Ning first met them, There was no one to stand at attention. They just gathered together and looked at Ning nonchalantly. Faced with such a mob, he was at a loss for a moment. What can he do? Nkos are not mushrooms that can grow out of the ground. Later, Ning said with a broken jaw in mind, "How about this? It's the first year of freedom. Everyone is equal. There shouldn't be officers who are high above you, so let's use the election method to elect Nkos. Is there anyone who would like to recommend himself?" Yes, and Ning was forced to start a military MZ in his own unit. He would not have to waste this effort if he had ready-made Nkos, but the problem was that he didn't have any. A group of big men looked at each other, and no one recommended themselves. And Ning had no choice but to raise her voice. "I will personally pay for the non-commissioned officers, in addition to the salary promised by the commune." Theoretically, a 200-man army should only need a dozen or 20 non-commissioned officers. And Ning had not used much of the money given by the system 10 years ago, and had saved it all. Now it was just the right time to use it to pay the non-commissioned officers. Of course, and Ning's salary would probably not last long, and he would still have to report to the National Guard and get money from the Paris Treasury. We'll talk about this later, and let's build the army first. Faced with a price Ning offered, several people were obviously tempted. Finally, a bearded guy raised his hand. "I want to vote for a non-commissioned officer." And Ning nodded. "Okay. Introduce yourself." My name is Jean Paul. They usually call me Big Beard. I have served in the army, and I know how to walk 1, 2, 1, up, that's all." And Ning, "Jean Paul, very good. Does anyone have any objection to Jean Paul being a non-commissioned officer? If you have any objections, please raise them. We uphold the principle of equality, and everyone can express their opinions." No one stood up to object, so Ning made a decision. "Okay. No one has any objection. Then let's start voting. Those who agree to let Paul be a non-commissioned officer, raise your hands." Everyone looked at each other and raised their hands one after another. And Ning, "Okay, put it down. Jean Paul, you are now the squad leader of the first squad. I will promote you to corporal. You will be responsible for managing the people in the first squad." And Ning randomly pointed at 10 people and said to Jean Paul, "These are the members of the first squad. They are all your subordinates. Take them to the side to get to know each other. Is there anyone who wants to be a non-commissioned officer? Come and recommend yourself." This time, several people raised their hands. And Ning selected 20 non-commissioned officers from the motley crowd assigned to him by the method of self-recommendation and collective voting. For the rest of the day, these 20 non-commissioned officers led the troops to conduct basic formation training. After Ning assigned the tasks to the newly selected non-commissioned officers, he took a carriage to the Palace of Versailles to continue the meeting. He never thought that his forced approach would have such a great impact on the National Guard in the future. While Ning was holding meetings and training troops, the situation was also developing rapidly. The news of the Paris Revolution spread across France, and people from all over the country rose up to overthrow the old ruling institutions, establish the National Guard and local self-governing councils. In the countryside, the peasants almost all sat and watched the people in the city make a fuss, until a rumor spread like wildfire. The rumor said that the nobles were resentful of the seizure of power by the Third Estate in the city, and were preparing to launch a counterattack in the countryside, sending robbers into the countryside to attack the countryside, destroy farms, and kill people everywhere. A large number of peasants believed it to be true, so they chose to take up arms like their compatriots in the city. Throughout the rest of July, the flames of resistance spread across the country. Just like the people in Paris broke through the Bastille, the peasants broke through the nobles' estates and sent the nobles who remained in the countryside to the lampposts. None of this had anything to do with Ning. For the rest of July, his main focus was on how to train the small force he had just obtained. The time came to the night of August 4, 1789. The National Assembly held a meeting until the evening. Just after 7 o'clock, the palace guards entered the imperial conference room with candlesticks. The hungry representatives left the room and went to the next room to get bread and dessert. And Ning was not hungry. He got a small plate of biscuits from the next room and returned to the conference room while eating. At this time, the chairman of the meeting, Monnier, stood up. "Everyone. I just received a letter from a friend. He told me what happened in the countryside of Vendée. According to various intelligence, the countryside has become a mess. If we don't take decisive measures, it may affect the upcoming harvest season. Affecting the harvest season will cause the food supply to continue to deteriorate. So I think we should suspend the discussion of the Constitution and urgently pass a decree on the countryside. As soon as the voice fell, Mirabeau stood up. What else is there to say? The countryside is actually out of control, and the previous feudal obligations no longer exist. The peasants are rioting because they are worried about the revenge of the nobles. At a time like this, as long as we tell the peasants openly and honestly that the nobles will not retaliate, the unrest will be over. I propose that we start with the nobles who are now in this meeting room. Mirabeau paused, then patted his chest and said, I, Mirabeau, voluntarily give up all feudal power, including the territory, and embrace freedom. Immediately, a representative of the old nobles roared, your territory no longer exists. But our territory is still there, and I am still protecting the people above it. As soon as the old nobles finished speaking, a representative of the Third Estate stood up and sprayed, you protect the people? I'm afraid the peasants don't want your protection. If you were not a representative in Paris, you would have been hanged by the peasants long ago. My subjects love me very much. Humph, I'm afraid that those country nobles who were hanged by the peasants thought the same way. Just as the two sides were confronting each other, the Duke of Orleans suddenly stood up. Enough. From the moment we became members of the National Assembly, didn't we decide to challenge the feudal system? I think it is time for me, Talister, Duke of Orleans, to formally give up my feudal power. From this moment on, the subjects of my fiefdom become free men. After a short silence, the entire venue erupted in thunderous applause. Then another Duke-level nobleman stood up. I, the Duke of Artois, give up my feudal power, and my subjects will now become free men. Another round of warm applause broke out in the Parliament Hall. Then one after another, the great nobles stood up and expressed their willingness to give up their feudal power. The representatives of the Third Estate had no feudal power to give up, so they could only applaud continuously. The little noble who had initially clamored, I am still protecting the subjects in the territory, was sitting there speechless. And Ning saw that he looked like he had lost his soul, shaking his head and muttering something. He probably muttered crazy, all crazy. The frenzy of expressing opinions continued, and some small nobles also began to follow the crowd, standing up to express their willingness to give up feudal power. In fact, they had no choice but to give up feudal power, because the countryside was full of smoke at this time. The peasants were smashing all the shackles in anger. This night of giving up power passed quickly. In the next few days, the Parliament discussed the resolution to completely abolish feudal obligations. Finally, on August 11th, the Parliament unanimously passed the August Decree to completely abolish feudal obligations and feudal relations. The entire decree abolishing all feudal obligations was quickly spread throughout France by post horses. Chapter 78 Declaration and Bread. August, the rumbling sound of artillery could be heard in the manor on the outskirts of Paris. And Ning was holding a monocular telescope and looking at the target in the distance. Several bullets hit the target far away. Before Ning could comment, Fanny behind him said, the accuracy is so poor, it's terrible. No, Fanny. And Ning shook her head and turned to look at her maid. These people have only received artillery training for a month. If they can fire the cannon, it will be a victory. And Ning paused and added, if they can fire the cannon without hurting themselves, it will be a victory. Fanny, is it such a low requirement? The situation is so chaotic now. The situation is indeed very chaotic, and it will be even more chaotic in the future. At this time, having an army loyal to you is naturally a great thing. And Ning looked at Fanny and smiled. Do you think such an army is unreliable in a chaotic situation? You think too much? This is the artillery of the National Guard, not my own private soldiers. Fanny, isn't it? Of course not. Don't say such things in front of outsiders. Of course. Fanny lowered her eyes and put on a humble look. Even if my mouth is rotten, I will never say these words in front of outsiders. However, although you do not regard them as your private soldiers, they themselves may not think so. I have heard more than once from the non-commissioned officers you appointed that they only recognize the captain. After the capture of the Bastille, and Ning's rank was promoted to captain by Lafayette. They said that. And Ning glanced at the maid, that's because I give them extra pay. With the current price of bread, without the extra pay, their whole family will starve. As he spoke, Sergeant Jean-Paul, who was promoted by Ning, ran over, saluted Ning, and reported loudly, all artillery groups have finished firing, please give instructions. Everyone take it back. Remember to clean the cannons. And Ning ordered. Yes. Jean-Paul saluted again and turned to leave. Looking at the back of this democratically elected sergeant, and Ning couldn't help but want them to shout loyalty. Loyalty. When they saluted. There is no way. The movie The Fifth Republic has no other advantages, but it is powerful. Fanny interrupted in Ning's reverie at this time. Now the price of bread has risen again. Although our bread is provided by the Duke, we don't have to worry for the time being, but if the price of bread continues to rise, Paris may. And Ning interrupted Fanny, don't worry, it's almost September now. There will be no major disasters this year, and the grain harvest will be good. The price of bread will drop by then. Fanny, is it too late? It's only a few months away. According to my estimation, there will be at most one large-scale riot in Paris. And Ning said confidently. In history, there was indeed only one large-scale riot before the grain price dropped. If Ning remembered correctly, it should have been in October. It's only August now, it's still early. And Ning, I'm going to the Palace of Versailles to attend a meeting. Let the coachman drive the carriage out. The manor where Ning lives now belongs to the Duke of Orleans. The Duke lent the house and the servants and coachman to Ning, so now he doesn't have to take a rented carriage to go to the Palace of Versailles anymore. Of course, it is not easy to find a carriage for rent in the location of this manor. The manor is outside the city, even outside the scope of the tier city wall planned and built in 1846. Such a remote manor, surrounded by completely empty fields, as well as shrubs and woodlands owned by the Duke of Orleans, gave Ning enough space to practice his artillery. Of course, this is also related to the current shorter range of cannons, and artillery training at this time does not require such a large venue. In such a wilderness, there is naturally no place to find a carriage for rent, so Ning took the Duke's carriage to the venue instead. The Duke of Orleans specifically ordered the family emblem on the carriage to be removed. Originally, the Duke said that he would ask the carpenter to make an emblem exclusively for Ning on Ning's carriage, but unfortunately, as the son of a leatherworker, Ning did not have a symbol that could represent himself. In the end, the Duke had no choice but to order the carpenter to carve the abbreviation AF of Ning's name on the carriage. To be honest, this abbreviation made Ning feel awkward no matter how he looked at it, and he felt that he would be short of water at any time. Not long after Ning gave his instructions to Fanny, the carriage with the letters AF inscribed on it appeared in front of him. The coachman had a sad face, and when he saw Ning, he just saluted hastily. And Ning couldn't help asking, "What's wrong, Fred?" Fred was the coachman's name. "Sir, it's still about bread. My wife and I work at the estate, so we don't have to worry about bread, but my brother is just a painter. No matter how hard he works recently, the whole family can't eat enough. I know the adults in Versailles are worrying about more important things, but can't they use a little bit of their talents to help us solve the problem of bread? Sir, you are a hero of the Bastille, please give him some advice." And Ning curled his lips and thought that if the gentleman in Versailles said there was a way, then there was indeed a way, as long as the people who are hoarding bread and food now open their warehouses and release the food. But the problem is that the people who are hoarding food now are the gentlemen who are meeting in Versailles. Of course, and Ning couldn't tell the truth, so he sighed and patted Fred on the shoulder. "Tell your brother that everything will get better in late October. Food prices will fall by then." Fred frowned, with an expression of disbelief. "Only one more month will be enough." And Ning nodded, "Yes, yes." Fred smiled, "Great, it's finally over. I'll send you to Versailles and then send a message to my brother to tell him the good news." And Ning felt a little uncomfortable. He opened the carriage door and got in the car, turned around and waved to Fanny, "I'm leaving. Have a good trip." Fanny waved goodbye with a stern face. And Ning closed the door, and Fred waved the whip, "Go." The carriage started slowly. When they arrived at Versailles and entered the Imperial Conference Hall, which was usually used for meetings, Danton came over excitedly and held in Ning's hand. "You are here at last. I heard from Monnier that today the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, which has been under review for many days, will be finally passed. Equality, freedom and fraternity will be realized on French soil." And Ning said, "But there is no bread." Danton was stunned for a moment, then rubbed his nose awkwardly. "This bread is only a temporary difficulty. With the formal signing of the August decree, the countryside will calm down, and the farmers will harvest this year's crops, and the price of bread will return to normal." Robespierre came over and cursed, "His Majesty the King just drags his feet and refuses to sign the August decree. In my opinion, we should take more resolute action." And Ning, how could he sign it? As a king, Signing the decree means that he has also given up feudal power. Will he still be the king at that time? Robespierre, of course. The King of England also gave up a considerable part of his feudal power and handed over power to Parliament, but isn't he still the King of England now? It can be seen that the current Robespierre is not the radical republican he would become later. Any radicalization will take a process. Robespierre is now obviously in a less radical stage. At this time, the speaker elected by the National Assembly, Monnier, stood on the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to vote on the final draft of a great declaration. What is now handed to you is the final version of the Declaration of the Rights of Man. We have 1 hour for the final discussion. In an hour, we will vote on this declaration. An hour later, the National Assembly unanimously passed the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Mirabeau stood up and shouted, "Long live! Long live freedom, equality, and fraternity! Long live the tricolor emblem! Long live the Declaration!" Ning also followed the crowd in shouting, "Long live the people," but what lingered in his mind was the worried face of the coachman Fred. The Declaration is certainly important. It laid the basic principles for legislation in most countries in later generations and is a great progress in human history. But the Declaration cannot buy bread. The people of Paris will soon take actions that will shock the respectable gentleman present because of hunger. Chapter 79 His Majesty the King feels he is all right again. Since the adoption of the Declaration of Human Rights, the focus of the National Assembly has shifted to discussing the specific provisions of the Constitution. Ning was very silent during this period because he was worried that once he spoke, he would say something beyond the times and shock everyone. He didn't want to be honored by Moshenki later. Ning's silence made his friends a little strange. Danton joked that he saved the parliament just to have a place to take a nap. During this period, Ning's attention was all on his small army. It's not that he has any special hobbies for training soldiers, but mainly these big soldiers will flatter him with all kinds of rainbow farts, which makes him very useful. Throughout September, Ning supervised the training of his small army in the manor in the morning, and went out to the National Assembly in Versailles to punch in the afternoon. After punching in, he found a place where the sun could shine and took a comfortable nap. After doing this several times, he got a new nickname, the Sleeper of the National Assembly. Members of the National Assembly even bet on him, betting on whose speech could wake Ning up. So far, no one's speech has been able to do this. But Louis V did it. The parliament was in progress that day when a representative suddenly rushed in from outside and shouted, "Oh no! Something terrible has happened." Monnier stood up and patted the table. "Calm down. What happened? Come out and see. Another army has come to the camp of the Swiss Legion that just withdrew in July." The representatives looked at each other and whispered. Danton patted Ning's shoulder desperately. "Get up quickly, something happened." And Ning yawned and got up, squinting his sleepy eyes. "What's the matter?" "The king has dispatched another army." "And Ning, another one." At this time, another representative ran in from outside. "I asked the officers who were heading into the garrison. They are the Flanders Corps originally stationed in Flanders, with 60,000 people." The representatives were shocked. 60,000 people. Isn't that 40,000 more than the Swiss mercenaries? This is already more than the total number of the National Guard in Paris. What does the king want to do? Danton turned to Ning and said, "Hurry, Andy, it's time for you to take the stage. Don't you have a small army? Do something." "And Ning, my small army has only 200 people. What can I do facing an army of 60,000? You should go to Lafayette. The National Guard has 43,000 people, and they can indeed compete with the 60,000 people of the Flanders Corps." At this time, Lafayette stood up and said, "Quiet. I think at this time, we should send representatives to ask His Majesty what he wants to do." Immediately, several representatives agreed. "That's right. Go and ask Lafayette. I think Chairman Monnier and Representative Mirabeau should go to meet His Majesty, and the others should wait for news here." Suddenly, a representative shouted, "Bring Mr. Frost with you. He has challenged the king several times, and the king is afraid of him." And Ning was shocked. "How could this cue me? I have been slacking off in the parliament for more than half a month. Logically, you should have forgotten about me, right?" Immediately, another representative agreed. "That's right. Frost always takes a nap. Now it's time for him to come forward. He is the king's evil star." "No, I'm not. Your Majesty, listen to me, I'm just a fence-sitter who goes with the flow." More and more members of parliament were shouting, "Mr. Frost, it's your turn. It's time to save the Parliament again. Lafayette stood on the podium, looking unhappy. He probably didn't want Ning to get involved in this matter, but he couldn't stand everyone's enthusiasm. So he looked at Ning. Mr. Frost, what do you think? Ning stood up. I'm just an artillery officer, Captain. I can't say anything about this matter. A representative interrupted Ning. Your troops are closest to Versailles. It's obvious that they are ready to force the palace at any time. Ning was shocked. My troops are indeed stationed in the wilderness between Paris and Versailles, but that's because the house that the Duke of Orleans gave me is there. If the house he gave me was on the other side of Paris, my troops would be stationed there. I don't have the final say on where the station is. The Duke of Orleans has the final say. Ning, that's just an artillery unit of 200 people, not even as many as the guards guarding the Palace of Versailles. I don't want to force the Emperor to abdicate. Just go with us. The representatives interrupted Ning again. Ning raised her eyebrows and had no choice but to say, okay, I'll go with Lafayette, Monnier and Mr. Mirabeau. By the way, because Monnier and Mirabeau have been particularly active in the Parliament in the past month, they have become leaders of the Parliament, and Monnier is also the Speaker of the Parliament. As for Lafayette, as the person who holds military power in the Parliament, he naturally has a lofty status. Lafayette, then there is no time to lose, let's meet His Majesty. Louis V looks very energetic today. As soon as he saw the representatives of the Parliament, he greeted them enthusiastically. Gentlemen, good morning. Good morning, Your Majesty. Lafayette saluted and went straight to the point. Today we saw the Flanders army moving into the camp near Versailles. May I ask what this is? Louis V smiled and said, Gentlemen, what are you worried about? I just transferred the army from a remote station to Paris so that they can enjoy their lives. I have prepared a banquet for the officers of the army in Versailles, and all representatives can also attend. Lafayette, Mirabeau and Monnier looked at each other, and Mirabeau also looked at Ning. Monnier, Your Majesty, mobilizing troops to the vicinity of Paris at this time may cause misunderstandings. What misunderstanding? Louis V asked back, explain to me what misunderstanding is. Don't I have the right to mobilize troops loyal to me? As he was talking, Queen Marie pushed the door and entered the study. The Queen did not speak, but stood silently behind the King. Louis V glanced at his wife, then frowned and said to the visitors, I have read the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the August decree you passed. Don't you think these two decrees are a bit too ridiculous? Especially the Declaration of the Rights of Man. According to this declaration, the royal power will no longer exist. The Declaration of the Rights of Man must be changed to include clauses respecting royal power. Everyone looked at each other, and Ning stepped forward. What if we don't do this? Will you let the Flanders Corps disarm the National Guard? Ning was mainly testing to see how determined Louis V was. However, Louis V obviously hesitated. Then, anyway, you must add the content of respecting royal power. Louis V emphasized again, even in the constitutional monarchy you advocate in Britain, they don't trample on royal power like this. Monnier wanted to speak, but the King issued an order to expel him. Enough. I still have to entertain the officers of the Flanders Corps tonight, and I still have to prepare the banquet. Please leave. Chapter 80, March on Versailles. Soon, the news that the Flanders army was stationed near Paris spread throughout Paris. Along with it, there was also a vivid little story. It was said that at the banquet where the King of France entertained the Flanders army, the officers of the army trampled on the tricolor emblem. As for the source of this little story, it is unclear. Anyone who swears to tell this little story will claim that it was told to him by an eyewitness, but if you ask who it was, he will certainly be hesitant and unable to explain clearly. On the third day of the Flanders army's stationing near Paris, in the early morning of October 5th, a large number of Parisians gathered in the square in front of the city hall. Lafayette ordered the National Guard to disperse the crowd, but the order was not executed. The crowd gathered more and more, including a large number of women. At 10 o'clock, a female fruit vendor climbed onto her fruit cart and shouted, "Everyone! I believe that His Majesty the King would not want everyone to fall into such a miserable situation. He must have been coerced and deceived by that German-speaking Austrian woman. We French women are going to make His Majesty the King wake up. As long as His Majesty wakes up, he will never sit and watch us starve. Sisters, let's go to Versailles. Let's go to meet His Majesty." The fruit vendor's call was immediately responded to by a large number of women present. Many of them are housewives. Now they really can't buy bread. The whole family is hungry. They have no choice but to go to the street. Someone shouted, "Catch the Austrian woman who let us eat cake." Yes, let her make cake for us. The fruit vendor who started it at the beginning shouted, "Sisters, follow us. Let's go to Versailles together." As she said this, she jumped out of the car and started walking ahead. The crowd followed him and set off from the City Hall square in a mighty procession. Lafayette was watching all this on the second floor of the City Hall, with a smile on his face. The mayor of Paris, Bailey, said beside him, "Should we order the National Guard to take decisive action?" Lafayette, what action? Isn't this just right? The king thinks that with the support of the Flanders Corps, he can sit back and relax. Then I want to see what he uses to deal with the angry people. Is it the Corps bayonet? Bailey, what if he uses a bayonet? Lafayette, he won't. Frost tried it when I went to meet the king yesterday. I can hear that the king has not made up his mind to be an executioner. Because of this, we can use public opinion to force the king to submit. The National Guard just needs to be prepared and come out to clean up the mess at the right time. Bailly raised his eyebrows. You are still as wise as ever. However, I want to remind you that the artillery unit led by Mr. Frost is closer to the Palace of Versailles. You'd better control the time to stand out, otherwise Mr. Frost will pick peaches again. Lafayette frowned. That Frost, he is either very good at hiding himself, or... Anyway, I have been observing him recently and think he is a guy with no ambitions. He really seems to be less interested in fame and fortune than sleeping. Bailly, maybe. Anyway, I reminded you. Lafayette nodded. Don't worry, I will grasp it well. On Ning's side, he was supervising the training of his small unit early in the morning, but suddenly a large group of people in waistcoats drove over along the road outside the manor from a distance. The troops who were training stopped and looked in the direction of the road. Someone whistled, "Wow, they all look like old women." Ning turned to the Corporal Jean-Paul whom he had promoted and said, "Corporal, line up and make them serious." "Yes." Jean-Paul responded, turned around and ordered, "Line up. Stand at attention. Be serious and don't talk." Ning put his hands behind his back and walked towards the road in square steps. He stood on the side of the road and said to the people walking on the road, "Ladies, where are you going?" "To Versailles." Someone answered, "We are going to ask His Majesty for bread." Ning understood what happened at that time. No need to ask, this is a very famous event in the history of the French Revolution, the March on Versailles. This incident almost caused Louis V to lose his head early, and scared him and the Queen. After that, the king completely softened and could no longer be tough in front of the National Assembly. When Ning was recalling the script, a woman recognized Ning. "Wait a minute, sir, are you the noble killer, the berserker who stormed the Bastille, Mr. Andy Frost?" "The berserker who stormed the Bastille? What the hell, I became a berserker. Will there be a little lolly with white hair and red eyes who will be my master in the future? The voice actor of the little lolly is still Micah Dalkey, right?" And Ning touched her nose. "Well, it's me. But I don't say berserker. Mr. Frost, come with us. Let's convince His Majesty. He must have been deceived by that Austrian woman. Don't take me with you. I can't sit on the fence anymore. You should ask someone else for help." And Ning, "Sorry, I still have to train the troops and can't get away for the time being." "Then let your troops come too. Bring your cannons." An elder sister said enthusiastically, "Let's go together to convince His Majesty. He must have been deceived by that Austrian woman." "Damn, bring cannons to convince His Majesty?" And Ning, "Forget it, just go ahead. His Majesty will definitely listen to your opinions." And Ning waved his hand and turned to walk towards his own troops. To be more precise, he fled. He was afraid that if he didn't flee, he would be forcibly carried to Versailles by the rushing masses. Then he would really become an opinion leader. As soon as he returned to his troops, Jean-Paul reported, "Captain, we have already formed a team and can set off at any time." And Ning was shocked. "Set off for what?" Jean-Paul looked puzzled. "Huh? Not setting off? I thought we were going to help the masses." And Ning, "What kind of help? Artillery team, don't move. We are a unit of the National Guard and can only be dispatched after receiving orders from General Lafayette." "Really?" Jean-Paul asked back with a suspicious look on his face. "Of course, what do you think? I thought we were your army, and we would fight wherever you said." And Ning, "Shut up. You can't say that. In short, this matter has nothing to do with you, just continue training." Then Ning supervised his troops to train for another 2 hours. During this time, people kept going to Versailles on the road in front of the gate. Ning thought that the Palace of Versailles was probably surrounded by the people at this time. If he ran to the Palace of Versailles at this time, the people might misunderstand. What if the people carried Ning and rushed into the Palace of Versailles? Anyway, Ning was carried into the Bastille last time, and he already had a psychological trauma. So Ning did not go to the afternoon meeting, and stayed in the manor with his troops. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Danton came to Ning on horseback. "Andy!" Danton shouted as he entered the courtyard of the manor, "why are you still here? The people have surrounded the Palace of Versailles. They are demanding that His Majesty the King leave Versailles and go to Paris to live in the Tuileries Palace." "Ning, is that so?" Danton looked at Ning and couldn't help laughing. "You seem to have anticipated this situation a long time ago. When are you going to show up?" "Ning, what do you mean by show up? Aren't you waiting for the most appropriate time to show up? With your prestige among the people, you will definitely be able to convince the people to disperse." Ning was shocked. "Is that what I thought? Even I knew it for the first time." "Ning, doesn't the king have the Flemish army? How can a few thousand people be a match for the 60,000 Flemish army?" Danton laughed and said, "The soldiers of the army refused to disperse the people and have withdrawn to their bases. Now the people have surrounded the Palace of Versailles, and only the French king's guards are still blocking the people from entering the palace. Ning, it seems that even if you are the Flemish army transferred from other places, you are deeply influenced by the Enlightenment." "That's right, His Majesty the King is running out of tricks. So when are you going to come forward on behalf of the people to force the palace? Just say I don't have this plan." At this time, 2 officers came on horseback, and when they arrived at the gate of the manor, they shouted, "His Majesty's order. The National Guard will go to Versailles immediately to disperse the people gathered in Versailles." After that, the 2 officers continued to ride their horses and gallop towards the city of Paris. On the road they galloped past, there were still a large number of people rushing towards Versailles. Danton looked at Ning. "The order has come. Are you going to ignore the king's order? The king may hold you accountable for your disobedience afterwards." Ning curled her lips. If she was not on the yard of the manor, she could still say that she did not hear the order. But the 2 officers who just delivered the order saw Ning through the gate of the manor. "Ning, Bull. Here." Corporal Jean Bull said loudly. "Gather the troops. We are going to Versailles." "Yes." The corporal paused and asked, "Do you want to bring cannons?" "What are you going to do with cannons to Versailles?" "Nonsense, of course not. We are marching to Versailles as infantry." Chapter 81 Remarks on the release. It will be available on the shelves at 12 noon on Friday. To be honest, I didn't expect much success when I started writing about foreign history. There are only 4 excellent books in this category, 3 of which are old books that have been completed for a long time. Among the top 30 sales of the History Channel, there is not a single foreign history book. So I have already laid low, and it is a victory if someone subscribes to it. When I subscribe to one myself, I can declare a great victory. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82 A Night at Versailles. Ning's small unit lit torches and set out on the road to Versailles. On the road, people shouted, "National Guard? Are you going to petition His Majesty?" Ning replied, "No, we are going to maintain order." Fortunately, it was dark at this time, and Ning deliberately stayed away from the torches, so no one recognized him as the hero of the Bastille along the way. If he was recognized, who knows what excessive statements would be spread. Maybe tomorrow all the bars in Paris will say that Andy Frost kicked open the gate of the Palace of Versailles and put a gun to Louis V's forehead. Ning didn't want this. At about 8 o'clock in the evening, Ning's small unit arrived at the Palace of Versailles. The Palace of Versailles was still brightly lit, and the torches of the people outside the palace were 3 or 4 times more than the lights of the palace. Seeing this, Ning couldn't help but frown. His small unit only had 200 people, facing the thousands of people outside the palace gate. It was really not enough. When the crowd surrounding the palace saw the army coming, they shouted at the top of their lungs, "Is this the National Guard? What are you here for?" Ning said unsurely, "We are here to maintain order." After he finished speaking, he heard someone in the team muttering, "How can we maintain order among so many people? If they blow together, we will be blown away." And Ning whispered, "Keep a straight face, at least we can't lose in momentum." At this time someone in the crowd asked again, "What are you here for?" It seemed that this person didn't hear Ning's answer just now. So Ning spoke again, "We are here to negotiate with His Majesty." Wait a minute, what the captain just said was, "Shut up." Jean Ball glared at the soldier who pointed out Ning's inconsistency twice. Whatever the captain said is what it is. We just need to show our momentum. At this time, the crowd was already shouting, "The National Guard is here to negotiate with His Majesty. Let's make way. Fellow villagers, make way for our army to enter." Mr. Officer, you must talk to His Majesty properly, don't let that Austrian woman lead you astray. Mr. Officer, let His Majesty go to Paris, he won't be deceived by bad guys in Paris. As they were talking, the crowd split into a path, and Ning led a small troop to the Palace of Versailles. During the process of driving in, a fellow villager recognized Ning and shouted, "Look, the officer leading the troops is the hero of the Bastille. What he says must work." Ning had an expression as if he had eaten a fly. He wanted to keep a low profile, but his reputation was too loud. Danton, who came with Ning, joked, "I guess tomorrow they will say that you kicked open the door of the Palace of Versailles." Ning pursed her lips and looked tense. When they arrived at the gate of the Palace of Versailles, the guards guarding the palace opened the door and let the National Guard in when they saw the National Guard coming. The National Guards were all wearing blue uniforms and liberty caps with tricolor emblems on them. The palace guards also wore the white uniforms of the French King's army, but they also added tricolor emblems on their caps. An officer of the guards looked at Ning's rank and immediately showed a disdainful expression. The colonel waited for Ning to salute before returning the salute, and then asked arrogantly, "Where's Lafayette? Why are there only so few people?" Ning, "General Lafayette's base is in Paris. We are close and came here first." The colonel waved his hand and said, "Let your troops line up in the square in front of the palace. You are not needed to guard the palace for the time being." Ning gave the order, and the troops led by the non-commissioned officers headed to the square. Several representatives of the National Assembly hurried over, and Monnier, who was in the lead, said, "Where's Lafayette? He should still be in Paris. We came here first." Ning replied, "Can your small force disperse the people?" Monnier asked in confusion. Ning spread his hands, "Of course there is no way. Shouldn't the most urgent task be to persuade His Majesty to quickly agree to the people's conditions? Monnier, we submitted a petition, but His Majesty has not responded yet. We will go to meet His Majesty with the people's representatives later." Monnier paused, looked at Ning, and said, "We originally wanted to wait for Lafayette to arrive and take him with us, but now it seems that we can't wait. You go with us." As soon as he finished speaking, Mirabeau behind him teased, "From the perspective of putting pressure on His Majesty, it is more effective to bring Mr. Frost than Marcus Lafayette." And Ning didn't want to go anymore. "Am I just a tool to put pressure on His Majesty?" Monnier nodded, "Indeed." "Then, Mr. Frost, will you come with us?" And Ning, "I was ordered to save the Emperor, so of course I have to go to see him." "Then let's go." After Monnier finished speaking, he turned around and strode towards the main building of the palace. Several women dressed as civilians followed him. And Ning couldn't help asking, "Who are these people?" Mirabeau waved his hand and said, "These are the representatives of the people. Most of the people who first came to Versailles were women. Look outside, all those crowded in the innermost layer of the palace wall are women." The mighty group of people passed through the brightly lit royal courtyard and entered the main building of the Palace of Versailles. After passing through several rooms, they entered Louis V's study. Louis V was already waiting here. When he saw Monnier coming in, he said sternly, "Why hasn't Lafayette come yet? His duty is to maintain order in Paris. It's his dereliction of duty that so many thugs surrounded the Palace of Versailles." Monnier frowned, "Your Majesty, the people surrounding the palace are not thugs. Look carefully, they are hungry Parisian women." As he said that, Monnier stepped aside to let Louis V see the women behind him. When Louis V saw this group of women, he was stunned. Before he could say anything, a woman rolled her eyes and fainted. Everyone was shocked and hurriedly reached out to help her. "Wait a minute. Let me do it." Louis V called everyone, stepped forward and squatted, helped the fainted woman up, and let her head rest on his knees. "What's wrong with you?" And Ning only saw the girl's face clearly at this time. She was about 20 years old, and her face was full of freckles common to girls of this era. The girl opened her eyes, glanced at Louis V, and murmured, "Bread. Your Majesty, bread." Louis V's face was livid. "Bread. They surrounded my palace just for bread." And Ning thought, what else? Louis V handed the girl to the palace guards next to him and stood up. Mounier did not miss this opportunity. He stepped forward, "Your Majesty, the citizens of Paris have no bread. If you don't do something, they will take more radical actions than taking down the Bastille." Louis V glanced at Queen Marie, who was standing behind the desk. And Ning noticed that the Queen was also there, so he stepped forward, "Your Majesty, as far as I know, the people have no cakes either." Louis V only saw Ning at this time, and he gasped directly. And Ning wanted to laugh. Damn, what a deep psychological trauma have I left on His Majesty. Mirabeau cleared his throat and said to Louis V, "It's not too late now. As long as Your Majesty signs the previous August decree and the Declaration of Human Rights, and attaches an order to let the grain merchants in the city lower the grain prices, the people will be satisfied." As soon as Mirabeau finished speaking, a gunshot was heard outside the window. And Ning, "Who is shooting?" Then there was the sound of a volley of gunfire. After the volley of gunfire, the entire huge courtyard of the Palace of Versailles was unusually quiet. The next moment, the people roared like a tidal wave. The guards opened fire. "It's these bad guys who held His Majesty hostage. Charge, take down their guns, push down the palace gate and rush in. We want to see His Majesty." Chapter 83 We Victory. And Ning, what is the commander of the guards doing? The people are armed. Isn't shooting them seeking death? As he spoke, he walked to the window and looked out at the courtyard. As a result, he saw the crowd pushing down the walls of the Palace of Versailles and pouring into the royal courtyard. The guards wanted to stop them, but were disarmed by the angry crowd. And Ning also saw that the guards officer who had just been arrogant to him was pierced through the body by a pitchfork and was held high like a flag. And Ning immediately stuck his head out and shouted to his troops in the courtyard, "Don't stop the crowd, retreat," and block the door of the building. He was afraid that his small army of 200 people would be evaporated by the crowd. After saying this, he withdrew his body, only to see Queen Marie staring at him with eyes wide open. "Why don't you let your troops do something?" And Ning, "Your Majesty, are you crazy?" The guards were instantly washed away like a mud dam in front of a huge wave. "What can my 200 people do? The only one who can stop the crowd is the Flanders Corps, but the Corps has withdrawn to its base." The Queen turned her head and said to Louis V, "Now let the Corps." Before the Queen finished speaking, a gunshot was heard outside, and then the glass in the room shattered, and the broken glass fell to the ground. The Queen screamed in fear. And Ning, "Your Majesty, it's too late, face reality." But the Queen did not face reality. She shouted at Louis V, "Look, it's all because you have been giving in. These people are not even afraid of the royal guards. They are no longer ordinary people. We must strike hard." And Ning, "The people are very hungry, and hunger will make people take risks." At this time, the sky outside was lit up by the torches in the hands of the people as bright as day. "Where is His Majesty the King?" Someone started shouting. Immediately, countless people responded, "Where's His Majesty? Let His Majesty come out and talk to us." And Ning turned his head and looked at Louis V, "The people are calling you." Louis V's mouth trembled slightly, and he looked down at the ground. And Ning reminded again, "The people are calling you. Don't let things become irreversible. I was at the Bastille and saw with my own eyes what the angry people did to the Marquis de Launay. When the people lose their minds, it will be too late." Louis V raised his eyes and looked at Ning. "Are you threatening me?" "I am stating the facts to you." And Ning said firmly, "When the people lose control, I am afraid that not only you, but everyone in the Palace of Versailles will suffer, even me. Your Majesty, go to the terrace and wave to the crowd." Louis V glanced at Queen Marie, pursed his lips and nodded, then moved his feet very reluctantly and walked towards the door leading to the terrace. The structure of the Palace of Versailles is like this. There is a row of small terraces on the second floor of the palace, and each room can be allocated one. The terrace is more like a large window sill than a balcony. The space is very small and can only accommodate 1 or 2 people. The guard opened the door of the terrace for Louis V, and he stood out and looked at the crowd holding torches below. The crowd not only held torches, but also rifles. At one time, countless muskets were aimed at Louis V. If the people were determined to change the king, Louis V would donate a volley of gunfire. If that really happened, the happiest person would probably be the Duke of Orleans, who could be crowned a king of France according to the order of succession. Of course, it could also be that his son would be crowned, and then the Duke himself would serve as the regent. Facing the guns of the people, Louis V was a little timid, and the whole person seemed to be a head shorter. Ning, wave, Your Majesty. Louis V mechanically raised his right hand and waved it gently. Ning, speak, the people don't know who you are, and most of them have never seen you. Louis V put down his hand and cleared his throat awkwardly. Hello everyone. I am your king. Yes, Your Majesty. Yes, Your Majesty. Your Majesty, we have no bread. Louis V. Oh, I know you have no bread. I will sign a decree requiring them to guarantee the supply of bread. I mean, asking the nobles. You will get bread soon. Everyone will get bread. Ning, and cake. Louis V. And cake. Are you sure you want me to say this? You don't have to say it, but it will make you look more humorous. At this time, the people gradually put down their raised muskets. Louis V breathed a sigh of relief, and mustered up greater courage to say, Everyone, I already know your demands. I will sign the August Decree and the Declaration of Human Rights tonight. You go back to Paris, go back and have a good sleep, and there will be bread tomorrow. We won't go back. Someone in the crowd shouted, unless you go back with us. Yes. Go back to Paris. You should be with your subjects. Louis V was in a dilemma. He turned his head and glanced at Ning. Ning, if you ask me, you should go to Paris. Anyway, you live in a palace. There is not much difference between living in Versailles and the Tuileries Palace, right? Louis V hesitated for a moment, then fled from the terrace and ran back into the house. The people immediately made a fuss. Your Majesty went to find that Austrian woman. Let that Austrian woman come out. The Austrian woman won't run away. The angry people once again raised their guns and began to shout in unison, Let the Queen come out. Let the Austrian women come out. Ning stepped back from the terrace door, turned to the Queen and said, The people are calling you. No. Queen Marie flatly refused, They will shoot me. Ning, they won't for the time being, I can stand with you. If they shoot, let them shoot me to death too. Queen Marie took a deep breath, closed her eyes and took several deep breaths in a row. Her appearance is really good looking, but it's a pity that today she has a hairstyle that looks like a black person's afro. This hairstyle seems to be particularly popular in this era. Ning has the impression that all noble ladies have afros. Maybe it's because with the current level of productivity, afros are more difficult and more expensive to maintain? Finally, the Queen opened her eyes and glanced at Ning. No, I will never stand on the terrace with the son of a cobbler. Ning frowned, and suddenly she had the urge to slap this woman. What the hell, can't she see the situation? Ning suppressed her impulse. Okay, please. The Queen lifted her skirt with both hands and walked towards the terrace. When she walked out of the terrace, the people were shouting, Let that Austrian woman get out. After seeing her appear, the crowd quieted down, but they did not put down their rifles. Queen Marie couldn't help swallowing her saliva in the face of the black muscles below. Then she said, I am your queen, that Austrian woman. Then, before the crowd could react, the Queen lifted her skirt with both hands and knelt to them. Long live France, she said. The people gradually put down their raised rifles. I don't know who started it. Long live the royal family. Then there was a mixed cheer of long live the royal family. Queen Marie turned and went into the house, put on a proud expression, and looked at Ning provocatively. Done. Ning could only curl her lips. You did a good job. Then the Queen turned to Louis V. We should leave Versailles immediately and live in the Verdun fortress. In this way, these civilians will not be able to threaten us. Or we can flee directly to Austria. It just so happens that I miss the big garden of Schönbrunn Palace now. Louis V frowned. I am the king, not a deserter. Now that I have run away, what will the people think of me? Aren't you leaving? Okay, I'm leaving. Queen Marie left the study angrily, and slammed the door when she went out. Ning sat and watched the development of the situation. He had been in the limelight enough tonight, so he decided to give the rest of the limelight to Lafayette, who was late. Mounier stepped forward. Your Majesty, the Queen is gone. Louis V waved his hand and said in self-abandonment, Let's go, let her go. Before he finished speaking, the door of the room opened, and Lafayette grabbed the Queen's hand and dragged her in. Several of the Queen's female guards came in later, including Christine. Seeing Ning was also in the room, Christine winked at him frantically. But Ning pretended not to see it. Lafayette, I saw Her Majesty the Queen in a hurry at the back door of the Palace of Versailles. Your Highness, you should be with His Majesty at this time. While Lafayette was speaking, a major and a group of National Guards rushed into the room. Lafayette saluted Louis V. Your Majesty, I think you have heard the people's demands. I have asked people to prepare in the Tuileries Palace, and that palace is ready to welcome the King of France at any time. Louis V took a deep breath, then pointed at Lafayette. You. And you. He pointed at Ning again. And Ning, I'm here to protect you, I swear to God. Lafayette said seriously, I am also here to protect you, and it was your Majesty who issued the edict yourself. And Ning, yes. Louis V sighed, and he sat down behind the desk like a deflated ball. Okay. If you want me to go to the Tuileries Palace, then go ahead. You want my royal power and a constitutional monarchy, then establish it. Bring me the bill and the declaration, and I will sign it now. Mirabeau and Monnier who were present were delighted, and Lafayette also slightly curled his lips. At least at this moment, the constitutional monarchy in France was a success. Monnier said excitedly, the revolution was successful. It can end here. Mirabeau rushed to the terrace and shouted to the people below, His Majesty the King agrees to go to Paris. Agree to the constitutional monarchy. We won. The people looked at each other, and then cheered together. Gradually, they began to sing a song called It's Gonna Be Alright, and for a while, the atmosphere of joy lingered over the Palace of Versailles. Chapter 84 How to Solve the Financial Crisis Quickly, Efficiently and Economically. That night, the French king and his family were escorted back to Paris by the National Guard and moved into the Tuileries Palace. The people who surrounded the Palace of Versailles also followed the National Guard that escorted the king and returned to the city in a mighty procession. The king entered the city, and the gentlemen of the National Assembly spent a whole night discussing what to do, and finally decided to move into the city. So Lafayette sent people to clean up the royal equestrian field next to the Tuileries Palace, caught all the horses and found another place to keep them, shoveled the horse manure, and then asked a carpenter to make a whole set of stepped stands and transformed it into a meeting place. When he first went to this new venue, Dan complained for a whole morning, saying that he smelled horse manure. And Ning actually smelled a little bit, but he had experienced the test of university dormitories and could quickly ignore the odor in the surrounding environment. Without this skill, there is no way to survive in the boys' dormitory. At the end of October, the National Assembly finally settled down in the original Royal Equestrian Field. The first meeting at the new venue was about a rather explosive issue, how to solve France's current financial crisis. Although the revolution had passed, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen had been promulgated, feudal privileges had been abolished, and the good harvest of grain had appeased the people of Paris. France's financial crisis had not been alleviated. France was already in debt of 4 billion livres, and the treasury simply could not afford to pay the debt. What was worse was that now, according to the August Decree, the peasants had completely ended their feudal obligations and no longer had to bear numerous taxes and levies, so they simply stopped paying any taxes. Not only did the peasants not pay taxes, but many civilians in the city also refused to pay the old taxes and fees, and did not recognize the legacy of these old systems. As a result, France, as big as it was, could not collect any taxes at all. Now the National Guard's military pay was basically sponsored by the great nobles and big businessmen, and towns outside Paris had successively experienced the situation where the local self-guard could not pay their military pay. What was even worse was the situation of the original kingdom's army, because the kingdom had completely stopped, and these armies had not been paid for a long time. News of the soldiers' mutiny reached Paris from time to time. Ning even received a letter from Napoleon, in which the young lieutenant complained that he was paid less in the army than before, only basic wages, and he had to spend extra money to mend his uniform. If the financial problem is not solved, the new constitutional monarchy of France will die in its cradle, and it may not even wait for the promulgation of the first constitutional monarchy. So the representatives of the National Assembly had to interrupt the original constitutional agenda and discuss how to solve the financial crisis. Lawyer Barnave spoke first. He gained considerable reputation because of his support for violent revolution after the revolution, and now he is one of the most important figures in the parliament, second only to Mirabeau and Monnier. Barnave stood on the brand new podium, holding the new railings of the podium with both hands, and shouted, "To solve the financial crisis, there is a simplest way. That is to let all the nobles, big businessmen, and bankers present here donate generously. You have so much property, so you should naturally take more responsibility. There was a burst of booing from the delegates. The nobles, big businessmen and bankers expressed their opposition in this straightforward way. But Barnave did not back down. I think a one-time patriotic bond should be issued. It should be subscribed by everyone on the basis of voluntariness and equality. As long as a bond with a face value of 1 billion livres is issued, our financial difficulties can be completely solved. What a fantasy. A pot-bellied representative immediately stood up and refuted. 1 billion livres, do you think this is a small amount? Do you want us to go bankrupt? Barnave still did not back down. The problem now is that the army can't even pay its soldiers. You have also witnessed the Versailles March in October. That was done by the hungry people. Just imagine what the soldiers who can't survive will do. In fact, we can always hear news of soldiers' mutiny recently. After Barnave finished speaking, the fierce opposition just now suddenly subsided. The rich people looked at each other, and it was obvious that they all thought of a terrible thing. Barnave continued, do you want to see soldiers rushing over to rob your property? Angry people can stab the Marquis de Launay on a spear and parade him through the streets, and angry soldiers can do the same thing. Who of you wants to parade in that form? Is it you? Or you? Or you? Barnave pointed at several people, but no one dared to answer. For a time, the entire equestrian field, the former equestrian field, fell into silence. Barnave was very proud. Yes, that's it, none of us want things to turn out like that. So I propose to vote for the issuance of patriotic bonds. Speaker Monnier stood up. Does anyone object? If no one objects, let's vote now. Half an hour later, the voting results came out. More than half of the members disagreed with the issuance of patriotic bonds. Barnave angrily pounded the railing of the podium. You will regret it. You will regret it when you are sent to the gallows by the rebels. With that, he walked down the stage indignantly and returned to his seat. At this time, a figure in black priest robes stood up and signaled to the speaker that he wanted to speak. At first, Ning did not pay much attention to this person. People in black in the parliament are generally conservatives, mainly a group of die-hard priests and small nobles. Almost all of them are dressed in black, so they are the Black Party. Generally, when these people in black stand up and speak, they are all the same old things, which is nothing more than changing the way to fight for the feudal power that has been lost. Some priests of the Black Party even advocate the restoration of tithes, which can be said to be extremely reactionary. But when Ning saw clearly who this man in black was, he immediately became energetic. This man was Talleyrand. Ning estimated that this chameleon was probably going to put forward his shocking suggestion that betrayed his class. Talleyrand stood on the brand new podium, stroked the new paint on the armrests with both hands, and spoke slowly. In fact, there is another good way to solve the financial crisis. It is better to say that the ready-made solution to the financial crisis is right there. Why haven't you gentlemen thought of it? Talleyrand looked around the room. Someone shouted unconvinced, don't brag, can you make money out of thin air? Although I can't make money out of thin air, I can tell you where you can get the money. Talleyrand said slowly, and then glanced at the leader of the Black Party, Father Molière. The church has accumulated a lot of wealth over the centuries. As long as we confiscate the church's wealth, the financial crisis will be solved. A burst of noise immediately broke out in the meeting hall. Father Molière of the Black Party stood up and said angrily, what did you say? Talleyrand, you traitor to the church. Are you worthy of the church's kindness in raising you? Talleyrand shrugged, the church is indeed kind to me, but now I am a member of the National Assembly, France is in danger, I have to stand up. And Ning was convinced. This is the real fence-sitter. Look at how righteously he said France is in danger. When Ning was convinced, the whole hall was noisy with all kinds of voices. At this moment, Mirabeau stood up and suppressed all the discussions with his deep voice. Everyone. I think this is a good idea. According to the constitutional principles we have established, human rights are endowed by nature, everyone is equal, and the privileges of the church will be permanently abolished. In the future, France should have a brand new, nationalized religion, just like the Church of England. The priests will no longer need those luxurious robes and gold and silver instruments. They can all be confiscated. And the church's land, as well as those churches that are so big that they can be used by servants, can all be nationalized. In this way, France will get billions or even tens of billions of wealth, enough to support us to establish a brand new tax system. Mirabeau's voice fell, and the noise rose again. Everyone was expressing their opinions on this explosive statement. Only Ning remained quiet. Ning was in the middle of a heated discussion with someone else, but suddenly noticed that Ning didn't say anything, so he leaned over and asked, "Why don't you express your opinion?" Ning curled her lips and said, "Confiscating church property can indeed temporarily solve the financial crisis, but, in the long run this may lead to the division of the church, and even lead to rebellion." Ning had actually read the script and directly spoiled the plot. But to Dong, this sounded like a vision for the future. Dong, not that serious, right? Why not? Think about it, in backward areas, such as Vendée, the priests of the church are the organizers of local community life, and they are very prestigious among the local farmers. Now you are going to rob the homes of these priests. What will the farmers do? Dong pursed his lips and fell into deep thought. Robespierre next to him also turned around and said to Ning, "Now that you put it, it's true. But there is no better way to solve the financial problem. We can't just take advantage of it. Fortunately, it's just a peasant rebellion, and it should be suppressed by the National Guard soon." Ning looked at Robespierre. "What if the peasants get help from Britain at sea?" Robespierre was silent. Ning sighed, "But you are right, now there is no way to solve the financial crisis except to confiscate the church's property. I am in favor of confiscating the church's property." Later that day, after a heated discussion, the Parliament passed a bill to confiscate the church's property with 568 votes in favor and 346 votes against. As a supplement to the confiscation of church property, the Parliament also decided to take back the Pope's two enclaves in France, Avignon and Cantal-Fernisson. No one expected that it was this decision that ignited the flames of civil war. Chapter 85 in the tavern. While the gentlemen in the old Royal Equestrian Stadium were discussing enthusiastically where to lead the country, the people of Paris were also discussing politics enthusiastically. 3 months ago, the hottest topics in the bars of Paris were usually the new arrivals from the brothels or the new charming Cambodian girls on the street. In the past, the drunkards in Paris were obsessed with discussing whether the Cambodian girls had made a deal with the devil, which led to their eyes fixed on their chest muscles when they appeared. But now, the Cambodian girls have fallen out of favor, and the drunkards no longer discuss their tricks of teaching goats to read or their figures. The most popular topic in the bar now is which gentleman has made an impassioned speech again. A considerable number of drunkards are illiterate and cannot understand the speeches published in various newspapers, but they can imitate the every move and tone of the gentleman on the podium vividly. Parisians went to the Parliament and various clubs to watch speeches. It became a fashion. Not only drunkards loved to watch, but also men in long pants, gentlemen in chaps, and even noble ladies in the city loved to watch. During this time, as long as you could get applause and cheers on the podium of the Parliament, you would become a household name in Paris the next day. On this day, the Wild Rose Tavern was discussing the gentlemen who gave speeches today as usual. The drunkards were discussing with great excitement, when suddenly someone sighed, "Hey, have you noticed that since the king moved to Paris, Mr. Frost rarely appears on the podium?" The drunkards looked at each other in bewilderment. Indeed, he has not been seen since the king moved into the city. The last time I saw the Parliament in session, I saw him taking a nap in the back seat. Has Mr. Frost lost power? At this moment, an old man with a beard spoke calmly. "Huh, what do you know? Mr. Frost is a man who hides his talents. Now that the Parliament is doing well, he has been lying dormant. Anyway, the previous capture of the Bastille and the rescue of His Majesty in Versailles have earned him enough reputation. When he opens his mouth now, everyone has to stop and listen to him carefully. Under such circumstances, if he talks too much, it is easy to make enemies, you know." Immediately, a fool said, "Why is it easy to make enemies? Didn't you see that the Parliament was about to fight in the recent meetings? Yesterday morning, a congressman said that he was so angry that he took off his shoes and threw them on the table." The old man narrowed his eyes and put on an unfathomable expression. Mr. Frost saw this situation and simply stopped talking, letting you guys quarrel. Anyway, when the Parliament reaches a critical juncture, he will stand up. After listening to this, everyone nodded. So that's the case. Mr. Frost is indeed far-sighted. At this time, a young man working in the dyeing factory asked doubtfully, "Is there a possibility that he is just lazy?" As soon as the voice fell, the young man was immediately glared at by everyone. He immediately backed down. I just said there's this possibility. Do you think he's you? You slack off every other day. I saw it yesterday. Mr. Mueller from the dyeing factory poked you on the back and scolded you, saying that you are a lazy ghost. Someone said so. The young man was about to refute, and the mysterious old man spoke again. Mr. Frost is an ambitious man. He will not muddle through like the rest of us. It's just that he likes to get the biggest return with the smallest investment. He won't waste his time arguing about such useless bills. Tell me for yourselves, it's been a few months since the signing of the Declaration of Human Rights. Has your life changed? Apart from the fact that the topic of conversation in the tavern has changed from girls to the speeches of the gentleman, has there been any change? Everyone thought about it and nodded. The old man continued, Mr. Frost must be waiting for the opportunity to change the situation in an instant. After the old man finished speaking, he stroked his beard proudly and took a sip from the wineglass. At this time, a middle-aged man spoke up, but, according to what you said, Mr. Frost is an ambitious man, so wouldn't the benefits he gained from the previous revolution be too little? It was obviously he who captured the Bastille, and he was the first to arrive at Versailles to rescue the emperor, but now the commander-in-chief of the National Guard is Lafayette, and the Speaker of the Parliament is Monnier. After Monnier retired, he was replaced by Mirabeau, and he has nothing to do with it. Tell me, what benefits has he gained from all the trouble he has been making for so long? The old man laughed. You don't understand, do you? Mr. Frost was originally just the son of a cobbler, and at most only a few regular customers and neighbors would know him. But now you see, even unrelated people like us know him, and are enthusiastically discussing his situation. This is what he gets for his benefit. As soon as the old man finished speaking, another strong man interrupted and said, I heard that he has a high reputation in the army. He has set up a voting system to select non-commissioned officers in his own artillery unit. Now the entire National Guard is making a fuss and wants to follow the standards of the artillery. I passed by the military camp before and saw Lafayette whipping the soldier who made a mistake in anger. It is said that the soldier asked to follow the example of the artillery to establish a soldier committee to elect non-commissioned officers. Really? But I think the elected non-commissioned officers are unreliable. Think about how other non-commissioned officers come from. They are trained in military academies like Brienne since the age of 10. Does the non-commissioned officer elected by the soldiers themselves have the ability to lead the team to fight? This speech was agreed by many people. At this time the old man spoke, we will know whether they can fight or not after sending them out for training. It just so happens that the church in Comte seems to be dissatisfied with the parliament's decision to take back sovereignty and is inciting the church members to rebel. The parliament has been discussing this matter recently, and it seems that they want to settle the rebellion with the National Guard instead of relying on the kingdom's old army. It is said that the local self-defense forces went to suppress the rebellion, but were directly driven away by the rebels. The local self-governing association sent an urgent express report, requesting the parliament to send troops. The drinkers immediately discussed, is there such a thing? Canta, isn't that the Pope's place? It is not the same country as us, what does it have to do with us? Didn't we just say that the parliament will take back Canta from the Pope? Confiscate the Pope's land just like confiscating church property. I heard that the parliament is also planning to send people to Rome to confiscate the Pope's property, because the Pope's land was given by Emperor Pippin the Great and belongs to the territory of France. While everyone was talking, the old man coughed, and after everyone's eyes were focused on him, he said slowly, in short, the parliament should take action soon. Mr. Lafayette has probably been uneasy about Mr. Frost's reputation for a long time. He will definitely find ways to give this task to Mr. Frost to embarrass him and reduce his reputation. Just wait and see, it will be these few days. Chapter 86, A Heavy Punch Must Be Struck. And Ning originally didn't care about the Cantar rebellion. Now it was the 4th month after the march to Versailles, February 1790, just at the beginning of spring. According to the script Ning had read, 1790 was a peaceful year. Apart from a series of mutinies such as the Nancy Mutiny, there were basically no major events. On July 14, 1790, the whole of Paris would celebrate the first anniversary of the capture of the Bastille and sing about the future together. It should have been like this. The reason for the mutiny was mainly because the revolution brought a new idea of equality for all, but at this time the French army was still the old army, with strict hierarchy among ordinary soldiers, non-commissioned officers, and officers. The lower-level soldiers who accepted the new ideas were unwilling to continue to be oppressed by the officers, and coupled with the army's arrears of wages, a mutiny broke out. But this was all the old army, and it should have nothing to do with the National Guard. As for the rebellion, according to Ning's memory, it should have broken out one after another since 1791 and reached its peak in 1793. Hugo's masterpiece 93 describes what happened during the most intense period of the French Civil War 1793. Now it is 1790, and there are still 3 years to go. So Ning didn't care about Quintat's rebellion at all. He thought it was a small rebellion that the local garrison could put out with a wave of his hand. As a result, at the end of February 1790, Quintat's situation became serious. The local revolutionary committee sent several letters to Paris in succession, asking Paris to take decisive measures and send troops to suppress the rebellion. At this time, Ning vaguely felt that Lafayette's expression on his face began to be wrong. Sure enough, on this morning, Lafayette ran from the National Guard command to the former equestrian field where the Parliament was located and asked to speak. The rotating Speaker of the Parliament, the virtuous one Pétion, immediately agreed to Lafayette's request to speak. Lafayette walked onto the podium. This podium, which had only been built for more than 4 months, had been painted shiny by the sweat of countless speakers. Everyone. Quintat's rebellion has spread to nearby cities. The rebels even rushed into the National Assembly in nearby cities and massacred deputies and patriots. I have a captain of the National Guard from Quintat here. I asked the speaker to allow him to speak on stage. Pétion nodded. You can speak. We also want to hear about Quintat's situation. Lafayette immediately gestured to the captain waiting in the audience. So the captain walked onto the podium. He still had a bandage on his head, and a large piece of blood was visible on the bandage. Captain, my name is Bel-Eller, and I am the captain of the 1st Infantry Regiment of the Libreville National Guard. Although it is an infantry regiment, our regiment has less than 1,000 people, all of whom are local patriots in Quintat. We received an order from the Libreville Revolutionary Committee to go to Quintat to suppress the rebellion. The order was to continue to occupy the town after eliminating the rebels, expel the Vatican's administrative personnel in Quintat, and restore France's sovereignty over Quintat. We set out immediately, but soon after leaving Libreville, we encountered rebels on the border between Quintat and Libreville. Mirabeau interrupted Captain Bell's story. What rebels? Where did the church come from? Captain Bell replied, it was the church's rebels. They wore black clothes, and their number was several times ours. My unit was defeated after just a volley of gunfire, and then the black-clad men began to chase us, stabbing everyone's heart with bayonets. They did not accept surrender at all, calling us pagans and killing us without mercy. The councillors in the room looked at each other. The captain continued, then the rebels attacked Libreville. There were no other self-defense forces in the city. The black-clad rebels stabbed anyone wearing a tricolor badge in the chest when they saw him on the street, even a child of 7 or 8 years old. The committee of Libreville was dissolved, and most of the councillors were stabbed to death with bayonets. This was a massacre without a doubt. The parliamentarians were in an uproar. Mirabeau stood up and glared at Father Molière, the leader of the Black Party in the Parliament. These are no longer ordinary rebels. We must strike hard. Lafayette walked back to the podium to replace the captain, but the captain did not give up his position immediately. Instead, he grabbed the railing of the podium with both hands, leaned forward, and shouted to the parliamentarians, "Gentlemen, there is not a single patriot left in Libreville. The blood of the patriots cannot be shed in vain. Gentlemen, send out the troops." Lafayette patted the young captain on the shoulder. "Okay, we get it. We will not let the blood of Libreville be shed in vain." Captain Bell nodded, and then gave up the podium. When he walked off the stage, many people came over and patted him on the shoulder. Lafayette stood on the podium, leaning on the railing with his hands apart, leaning forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the greatest challenge to the new France, a challenge to freedom, equality and fraternity. A challenge to the Declaration of Human Rights. We must strike back with thunder. I propose an immediate vote to dispatch the National Guard to Quintat to quell the rebellion." Barnave raised his hand and asked, "Is it possible to mobilize troops from nearby areas? Must we send suppression troops from Paris?" Lafayette answered loudly, "Paris has the largest number of National Guards and has been established the longest. Moreover, Paris is deeply influenced by the Enlightenment and has the highest military awareness. At this time, Dispatching the National Guard of Paris to suppress the rebellion in Quinta with thunderous force can highlight the strength of the new National Guard and give confidence to patriots everywhere. Barnave nodded repeatedly and said nothing more. Pétion stood up. Then, let's start the vote. Those who agreed to send the National Guard from Paris to suppress the rebellion in Quinta, please vote. Half an hour later, the result came out. Only 8 people in the entire parliament abstained from voting, and 27 people opposed it. The resolution to dispatch the National Guard was passed by almost unanimous votes. After Pétion announced the result, he said to Lafayette, who was still standing on the podium, "Your Excellency, the Commander-in-Chief of the National Guard, the Parliament authorizes you to send out the anti-rebellion troops." Lafayette nodded, and then looked at Ning in the audience. And Ning suddenly felt bad. When Lafayette came to the stage, he felt that the Commander-in-Chief would look in his direction from time to time. Lafayette, then, I propose that the Parliament review the candidate for the anti-rebellion commander. I propose that this time, the hero of the capture of the Bastille, the savior of Versailles, and the founder of the soldier committee system, Andy Frost, will serve as the commander. It turned out to be such a way. And Ning cursed in his heart. 1790 was a year that was mentioned in history books. When talking about this year in history books, the basic focus was on what resolutions the Parliament passed and what policies were implemented. There was no mention of specific things at all. So Ning's original plan was to slack off this year and wait for the more exciting 1791 to come. As a result, he became the commander of the rebellion. Mirabeau responded loudly, "I think it's possible. Mr. Frost is very brave and will definitely be able to defeat the Black Robe rebels." Chapter 87 Lafayette, you plotted against me. And Ning stood up quickly and interrupted Mirabeau loudly, "Mr. Mirabeau, wait a minute. Commander Lafayette, you know that my army is only an artillery unit of 200 people." Lafayette smiled slightly. "Of course I will assign you infantry. I plan to draw 2,000 infantry to form a rebellion suppression army together with your artillery." And Ning, wait a minute. Captain Bailey just now. Captain Bell. Lafayette smiled and corrected Ning's words. Didn't Captain Bell say that their local self-defense force has nearly 1,000 people? A 1,000-man army was easily defeated. Isn't it a bit weak for me to bring only these troops to suppress the rebellion? You have 2,000 people, twice the number of local troops in Libreville. And you also have artillery. Lafayette maintained a smile. Why, do you think these troops are not enough? And Ning, I don't think it's enough. Give me another 8,000 people. He didn't want to go, so he asked for a high price at this time, with the purpose of turning down this job. Lafayette, there are only 43,000 National Guards in Paris, and you are going to take away 10,000 people. Isn't that inappropriate? If you take away so many people, the public security in Paris will definitely deteriorate. Do you want to rely on the King's army to maintain public security? Aren't you afraid of the vicious incidents like last year? There are 2 types of French armies now. The old army is called the King's Army, and generally even the uniforms are maintained in the royal grey of the old era, while the new army is the National Guard composed of patriots, and the uniforms are all blue. Whether it is the old army or the new army, they will wear the tricolor emblem. Ning, then transfer the King's army to me. Our goal this time is to prove that the National Guard is a solid and reliable force. The National Guard must be used to quell the rebellion. Ning, then why not ask the Commander-in-Chief of the National Guard to quell the rebellion personally? Why? Lafayette raised his head slightly and squinted at Ning. Are the heroes of the Bastille afraid? You are a strong man who dared to attack a well-fortified fortress with only a group of unorganized rebels. During the Versailles incident, you dared to go to the Palace of Versailles surrounded by tens of thousands of people with only 200 people. Rescue the king, but now you are telling me that you dare not suppress a mere priest rebellion. Ning, it's not a question of whether I have the courage or not. I dared to go to the Palace of Versailles to rescue the king because I was familiar with the people and knew what they would do. But this time we are facing rebels, and rebels who have already let go and massacred patriots in a city. Facing such an enemy, I must have an advantage in manpower, otherwise the lives of the National Guards will be sacrificed in vain. Isn't the sacrifice of the Libreville National Guard enough to remind you of this, General Lafayette? Lafayette curled his lips. Mirabeau showed his flexible position at this time. It seems that what Mr. Frost said makes sense. Maybe more troops should be allocated. Lafayette was silent for a few seconds, and gave in. Okay, I will dispatch more troops. Your troops are just the advance team. If the enemy is strong, you will retreat and not fight them. And Ning, since it is an advance team, I should have cavalry. Cavalry is the most suitable type of troops for reconnaissance and outpost missions. You asked me to lead an infantry unit with a heavy infantry gun as an outpost. Is there something wrong? Lafayette replied, unfortunately, the entire National Guard has no cavalry. The National Guard is composed of free citizens, and the main source of soldiers is urban civilians. Many of them can't ride horses at all. And Ning, how to scout without cavalry? Lafayette, you are a professional soldier. Tell me what is the difference between a unit without cavalry and a blind man? In this era, cavalry is the main means of reconnaissance for the army, and it is the eyes and ears of the army. Especially the light cavalry represented by the hussars, which is very important in battlefield reconnaissance in this era. Seeing that he could not win the argument with Ning, Lafayette frowned and said, so, the hero of the Bastille is determined to refuse this job. And Ning was about to answer when the rotating speaker Petion spoke up, it's just reconnaissance. The main force led by General Lafayette is right behind. Mr. Frost, I think you should accept it. I think most people in the parliament hope that you will show your talent in war again. You are a person with a cross. And Ning picked up a Legion of Honor medal for his brave act of saving Christina. And Ning thought to himself, damn, when did I become a person with a talent for war? Wasn't I just carried into the Bastille by force? The representatives of the parliament looked at Ning, and most of them looked at him with expectations, but some people's eyes were obviously malicious. And Ning pursed her lips and considered it. In fact, it's not impossible to go. Take the troops to a city near Canton and station them, waiting for the follow-up main force. If the main force doesn't come, he won't go. It just so happens that we are a little tired of attending meetings all day, so it would be nice to go out for an outing. So Ning gave in, okay, I will lead this advance army. Before that, just to be on the safe side, let me ask, among the 2,000 people given to me, how many professional non-commissioned officers are there? Lafayette, 15. And Ning was shocked, 15 non-commissioned officers? 15 non-commissioned officers are responsible for 2,000 people. Lafayette, I mean, there are only 15 professional non-commissioned officers who have been trained at the Brienne Military Academy, and the others were promoted after the establishment of the National Guard. And Ning held his forehead directly, then have they been elected by the Soldiers' Committee? Most National Guard troops do not have a Soldiers' Committee. This organization can be regarded as a special system of the National Guard artillery. Lafayette answered seriously. And Ning wanted to sigh, 2,000 scattered soldiers, and the grassroots non-commissioned officers were all inexperienced rookies. If this unit was sent to fight and be shot in a line, it would probably collapse faster than the National Guard in Libreville. Forget it, he didn't expect to defeat the rebels with a small force, so he would just march into the city near Colta and start the battle. So Ning replied, okay, I get it, I will be the commander of this small force. Oh, by the way, I'm just a captain, isn't it a bit too much to command 2,200 people? And Ning's original intention of saying this was to let Lafayette promote him. But Lafayette didn't buy it, he smiled and retorted, don't worry, you are already the highest rank among these 2,000 people, and you will be promoted directly to sergeant. Damn, there is not even a second lieutenant. This kind of troops may not even be able to march in line with the infantry, let alone line up and shoot. Lafayette, you are plotting against me. Chapter 88 New Troops. After receiving the mission, Ning left the parliament directly and went to the military camp to see the 2,000 people assigned to him. Lafayette also went with him. As soon as he arrived at the military camp, he could see a troop lined up in the yard of the military camp. Lafayette, it seems that the troops that are ready to be handed over to you for command have already lined up. Let's meet them. Ning, I can do it without you telling me. As he said that, he walked towards the queue, observing the queue as he walked. The National Self-Defense Force has always been enthusiastic, but the military discipline is not good. On the way to the queue, Ning saw several slacking guys in the queue. When he arrived in front of the queue, the sergeant at the front of the team shouted, everyone stand at attention. The team responded to the sergeant's words with sparse movements. Ning couldn't help but hold his forehead. His artillery unit had been carefully reorganized, and the military discipline was at least acceptable. This group of self-defense forces was basically a group of street urchins. It seemed that the military discipline was completely unsatisfactory. Ning, Sergeant, are you the highest-ranking officer in this unit? As you can see, yes. The sergeant showed a helpless expression. Officers are reluctant to join the National Guard, thinking that we are just a bunch of idle second-rate people. Someone in the unit said loudly, "That's indeed the case." And Ning turned his head and looked at the troops. "Who said this just now?" Everyone looked at each other, and finally their eyes were focused on one person. That person looked sloppy. Everyone stood at attention, and he stood sideways. "And Ning, please introduce yourself." The man said, "My name is Sheridan Wendell, and I'm a carpenter in the Saint Antoine district." Paris was in chaos during that period, and there was no work for carpenters, so I joined the army. "And Ning, now that public order has been restored, you can go back and continue to be a carpenter. We are going to Kanta to quell the rebellion next, and we will experience very dangerous battles. A carpenter doesn't need to go through all that." "Wendell, go back now? Being a National Guard can make much more money than being a carpenter, and it doesn't have to be so hard, and there are clean and handsome uniforms to wear. I don't want to go back to being a carpenter." "And Ning, you don't know? We are going to deal with the rebels in Kanta, and they brutally massacred the National Guard in Libreville. In the future, the National Guard will take on more and more tasks of fighting the rebels. If you stay in the army with this idea, you will regret it." The carpenter hesitated for a while and said, "If this month's salary is paid, it's okay for me to leave." And Ning turned to Lafayette, who followed him, and said, "Who should I find to pay him the military pay?" "Lafayette, secretary. Give this carpenter this month's military pay." "And Ning, who else wants to quit?" "Just collect the military pay and leave. I only want those who are willing to fight for a better France." After the voice fell, the soldiers looked at each other, and then more than 100 people walked out of the queue. "And Ning, is that all? Are the rest of them warriors willing to bleed on the battlefield for a better tomorrow? I can tell you, Kanta's rebels are very brutal, and we may not come back if we go to suppress the rebellion." After the voice fell, and Ning glanced at the queue, another group of people walked out of the team. "And Ning, anything else? I want to make sure that the rest of the people are warriors willing to sacrifice themselves for a better tomorrow." After Ning finished speaking, the whole playground was silent. Suddenly someone shouted, "We are the warriors you want." "Yes, we are. Heroes of the Bastille, take us with you." And Ning nodded, then turned to Lafayette and said, "These soldiers who are leaving will be left to you. Lafayette, I won't fill the vacancies of these people for you." "And Ning, it's okay if you don't fill them. Anyway, I'm just performing the forward reconnaissance mission." Lafayette nodded, then gestured to the adjutant behind him, so the adjutant stepped forward and said to those who left the team, "If you follow me, you will be paid 1 month's salary as Mr. Frost promised." And Ning watched Lafayette's adjutant leave with these deserters and breathed a sigh of relief. This at least ensured that his troops were all patriots full of revolutionary enthusiasm. And Ning turned to Lafayette again, "General, can you lend me the lieutenant from Libreville?" "What are you going to do?" Lafayette asked doubtfully. "Add him to the army? A lieutenant can do little to the discipline of the entire army." And Ning shook his head repeatedly. No, you misunderstood. I want him to tell the soldiers about the brutality of the rebels so that the soldiers can be mentally prepared." Lafayette raised his eyebrows, then turned his head and said to the person behind him, "Go and call Captain Bell over." A moment later, the survivor from Libreville arrived on the playground. And Ning invited him to the soldiers. "Captain, tell us about the brutality of the rebels." The corners of Bell's mouth twitched, and it was obvious that recalling this incident made him extremely painful. "I really don't want to recall it anymore. That's my nightmare. It visits me every day and makes me wake up in sweat." And Ning patted the captain's shoulder. "The troops in front of you are the ones I just assigned to me. We are going to Kanta to quell the rebellion. We need you to tell us how brutal the enemy is and let them be mentally prepared." The captain was shocked, and then looked at the troops on the playground. "What? Such a small army is going to quell the rebellion? This number of troops is about the same as the number of the self-defense forces in Libreville. Going to quell the rebellion is like walking into a tiger's mouth." Lafayette looked embarrassed. "They are just the advance team, paving the way for the main force of the National Self-Defense Force." Captain Bell glanced at Lafayette, then looked at the soldiers who were staring at him, and then sighed. "The rebels, wearing black uniforms, like mourning clothes. They rushed into Libreville and slaughtered everyone wearing the tricolor emblem." As Captain Bell began to narrate with a painful look on his face, and Ning saw that the faces of the soldiers assigned to him were becoming serious. Very good, very good. His approach actually referred to the approach taken by our army at the beginning of its establishment. Making sure the soldiers know who the enemy is and why they are fighting can more or less make up for some of the deficiencies in training and discipline. As for other things, Ning actually had a new idea at this time. In order to implement this idea, he had to return to the manor where his small troop was stationed. He planned to divide his small artillery unit into two. After all, there were only a few cannons in total, and 100 people were enough to operate the cannons. When Ning was training, he was thinking about expanding the organization after replenishing his artillery, but now there is no additional artillery, so there is no need for so many gunners. In this way, the troop he trained personally can be divided into two. Half of them will operate the artillery, and the other half will be added to the more than 1,000 infantrymen he has newly acquired as grassroots non-commissioned officers. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89. The army has not yet moved, but the food and fodder have already been sent. He did what he thought. That afternoon, Ning returned to his manor and assembled his artillery unit. As soon as he finished organizing the team, Russell, the deputy he personally picked, asked, "Mr. Frost, I heard that you were promoted to corps commander." Ning, who said that? This afternoon, an old farmer who went to the city to deliver food came back and told us that you became the corps commander and commanded a large corps. Ning was shocked. What corps commander? They gave me less than 2,000 people. I started with almost 500 people, and there were just over 1,000 left. Russell, that's also a troop. Now the army you command has expanded tenfold. Ning, shut up, don't talk about it as if it's a good thing. I think this is Lafayette. He saw that my reputation was too high, so he deliberately tricked me. He asked me to take such a small army to suppress Kinta's rebellion. It was obvious that he wanted me to return and defeat. Russell was shocked. Is that so? The reason why Ning chose Russell as his deputy was mainly because he valued his loyalty and honesty. To put it bluntly, he was a bit of a blockhead. This sergeant promoted by Ning himself was originally a bricklayer in Paris, and he usually speaks in a simple and honest way. Ning, anyway, this time we go to quell the rebellion, mainly for show. Lafayette promised that he would personally lead the main force of the National Guard to quell the rebellion. We will go as a vanguard, scout the enemy situation when we arrive, and wait for Lafayette's main force to arrive. We won't fight if the main force doesn't come. Ning didn't say this part. He paused, and changed the subject. Gathering you together is to do one thing. I plan to divide you into two parts. One part will continue to operate the artillery and serve as artillerymen, and the other part will be directly promoted, privates to corporals, corporals to sergeants, and those who want to be promoted will take a step forward. Everyone looked at each other, and no one stepped forward at first. Ning, why? You don't want to be promoted? You will get more pay. Someone below muttered, in my experience, things that look very good are often a trap. Well, Ning scratched his head, I'll tell you the truth. The new troops assigned to me are a mob. They can't even stand in basic formation. I need you to train them hard. This is not an easy job, so I will give you a raise. If no one volunteers for promotion, I will take the initiative to choose people who I think are capable for promotion. Ning paused and asked again, is there anyone who volunteers for promotion? Only a few people took the initiative to step forward. Ning, okay, you guys, you are all great. So I decided to promote you directly to sergeants. When you arrive in the army, as sergeants you will become company commanders. The company commander should be a second lieutenant, but now there is a shortage of officers in the National Self-Defense Force, so it can only be a non-commissioned officer. Ning paused, then pointed at Russell and said, You, Russell. You are still my adjutant, but because the troops under my command have expanded, it is not appropriate for you to remain a sergeant. I will promote you to second lieutenant, and you will continue to serve as my adjutant and the second commander of the entire army. If I die, you will command the entire army. Russell was shocked. This is inappropriate, right? A lieutenant is an officer master, and I am not used to being called a master. Ning, no. We are the National Self-Defense Force, and we uphold the principle of equality for all. Officers and soldiers are also equal. In the future, our soldiers will be called combatants, and officers will be called commanders, and the two are equal. As long as a soldier performs well, he can become an officer. Russell, you are the first soldier in my army to be promoted from a soldier to an officer. You can be promoted because I think you have the ability. Don't let me down. Russell was so moved. Yes, I will definitely perform well. Then Ning named a series of activists he remembered, promoted them to sergeants, and then asked them to recommend their friends to be promoted to sergeants. After more than an hour of hard work, Ning had a team of 100 non-commissioned officers. He led the team into the city and assigned them to the new troops assigned to him. In the National Guard headquarters, Lafayette's deputy entered his office, saluted, and then reported, Frost promoted the people in his small artillery unit to non-commissioned officers, and then brought them to join the troops assigned to him. He also asked the headquarters for the corresponding number of non-commissioned officer rank insignia. Lafayette frowned. What the hell, he doesn't really expect to use those civilians to lead the army? In this way, his troops will be defeated after the first round of volleys. I've seen it in the New World. At that time, there were a large number of militiamen in the U.S. Army. These militiamen were not reliable at all. Once the Red Army charged with bayonets, they would inevitably collapse. The militiamen are just a mob, even if they are dressed in uniform blue uniforms. Not to mention that this group of militiamen is led by non-commissioned officers who are also civilians. What the Army needs are well-trained non-commissioned officers and experienced officers. The adjutant shrugged. Maybe Mr. Frost has a different opinion. Humph, he's just the son of a shoemaker. He knows shit about war. He was able to win the Legion of Service medal because he saved Telestel's daughter. It's not valuable at all. Lafayette said contemptuously. This time the rebellion will completely shatter all his honors and expose his true colors. I've had enough. People always think that this shoemaker's son has the same military talent as me. In fact, in the eyes of drunkards in Paris, Andy Frost's military talent is better than Lafayette's. The adjutant asked, then, do we need to approve his request for promotion to non-commissioned officer? How many non-commissioned officers does he want to be promoted? 60 corporals, 30 sergeants, 22 staff sergeants and a second lieutenant. Lafayette frowned. Where did he get a second lieutenant? It seems to be his former adjutant, a bricklayer he promoted. Lafayette was shocked. Bricklayer. What does he think of the army? He actually made a bricklayer an officer. I can't wait to see the defeat of his small army. The adjutant asked in confusion. It's not up to us to quell the rebellion. The National Guard is not ready to go out in full force, and we still have to maintain the law and order in Paris. Lafayette came to the window. So before we go out, Mr. Frost can only find a way himself. At this time, Ning was coming out of the National Guard barracks. He had just stuffed the non-commissioned officers he had led for several months into the troops that had just been assigned to him. He actually had no idea how much these people could play a role. But at this time he had more urgent things to worry about. Before the three armies move, food and fodder must be sent first. Compared with food and fodder, Ning has a more urgent problem to worry about: military pay. Now the pay of the National Guard is paid with certificates issued by the National Assembly. Only patriots accept certificates. Outside of big cities where patriots gather, people in rural areas do not recognize them. Especially in rebellious areas such as Kinta. Ning wants to use copper coins to pay the pay of his troops. At the same time, he also hopes that his troops can obtain some silver coins as military funds so that they can sell food and supplies in the countryside. You can't forcibly requisition food in the rebellious area. Would that be equivalent to pushing the people in the rebellious area to the opposite side of themselves? In order to solve this problem, Ning decided to find the Duke of Orleans. Chapter 90. What does it mean to lose money and your daughter? Normally, nobles in this era would send servants to deliver a message before visiting each other, but Ning didn't care about that. He was not a noble anyway, so he went directly. He returned to the royal palace and went straight to the main house. The housekeeper of the main house was also quite tactful. When he saw that it was Ning, he immediately went to inform the Duke. A moment later, Ning met the Duke in his study. Why are you here? I thought you were busy preparing to set out to suppress the bandits. The Duke came forward and gave Ning a tight hug, then lowered his voice and whispered, I think Lafayette seems to be very dissatisfied with your reputation. Be careful of a trap. Ning smiled bitterly and thought to himself that I also knew it was a trap. Your Excellency the Duke, I already know it's a trap. Guess how many people Lafayette gave me? How many? Less than 2,000 stragglers. These people can't even march in formation. Moreover, there are only 15 trained non-commissioned officers in the entire unit. These people will retreat after the first round of volleys. The Duke frowned. Isn't this too obvious? You should protest to the Parliament and ask Lafayette to give you more troops. Lafayette will say that we are just going to form a vanguard for the main force. So what are your plans? Use this few troops to fight the rebels to the death? Asked the Duke. And Ning, how is that possible? Of course I will wait and see when I get to the location. If Lafayette's troops don't come out, I will come back to complain. The Duke nodded. Very good, I will also help you urge Lafayette to send troops. You came here today for this, right? No, and Ning shook his head. I came today for another thing. I hope that Your Excellency the Duke can sponsor a sum of military funds. The Duke frowned. Sponsorship funds? Didn't Lafayette give you money? I did, but it was in notes. I'm afraid the notes won't be useful in the rebellious areas. I need silver coins, crowns, and livres. The Duke frowned, looking embarrassed. Recently, because of the revolution, I can't collect taxes in my territory. And Ning curled his lips. Sure enough, when it comes to money, the Duke is not so easy to talk to. But this excuse is a bit too confusing. It is true that the Duke cannot collect taxes from farmers, but he has mines and factories in his territory, and he also has many businesses. The Duke's business relied on the Duke's reputation to obtain tariff reductions in many fiefdoms, and could reap pure profits by shipping goods from southern ports such as Marseilles. Therefore, the Duke of Orleans could never be without money. Rather, for a new noble like him who had become bourgeois, the peasant's land tax was a small part, so he could just give it up. It was for this reason that the Duke of Orleans pushed the decree so vigorously when it was signed last August. For him, it was just sacrificing a little bit of interest in exchange for great reputation, which was an unprecedented good thing. And Ning, Your Excellency, although I am only pretending this time, what if I get a good opportunity and wipe out the rebels in one fell swoop? Isn't this possibility worth your risky investment? If your troops were stronger, I would be willing to give it a try. The Duke shook his head. But you just said that it is just a mob. I will naturally worry that my investment will go down the drain. And Ning, you can't think so. In fact, tomorrow you can announce that you funded the suppression of the rebellion and gain great prestige. Now in the National Assembly, as a great noble, you have less say than Mirabeau. Don't you think you should do something to increase your influence in the Parliament? The Duke of Orleans' face darkened when he heard Mirabeau's name. Mirabeau was originally a writer he funded, and he mainly hired him to write dirty stories about the Queen. Unexpectedly, the trash he raised now relied on his flexible social skills to make a living in the Parliament. Of course, the Duke was unhappy. And Ning deliberately mentioned Mirabeau to stimulate the Duke and reminded him not to miss this good opportunity to increase his reputation. The Duke stood up, paced back and forth in the study twice, then pointed at Ning and said, I can only give you a one-time grant of 10,000 livres, all converted into crowns. No more. And Ning immediately saluted the Duke respectfully. Thank you very much for your generosity. The Duke, I will write to the bank and ask them to prepare the silver coins. Tomorrow, no, it should be the day after tomorrow, the silver coins will be delivered to your estate. The Duke said your estate here. In fact, the estate where Ning lived was also the Duke's property. If you think about it carefully, he was simply taking advantage of the Duke to grab his money. And Ning bowed to the Duke again. I have no questions, I'll just wait for the silver coins to arrive. The Duke, yes. By the way, have you eaten? If not, stay and eat with us. And Ning, sorry, I have another important thing to do tonight. What important thing? The Duke asked half-jokingly. More important than having dinner with your sponsor. I need cavalry. Marching and fighting cannot be done without cavalry as reconnaissance cover. An army without cavalry is like a blind man. It is easy to run into the enemy and be wiped out. And Ning paused, combined with what the captain of Libreville who escaped back said, they didn't have cavalry reconnaissance either, so they ran into the rebels head-on, and were slaughtered in a hasty battle. The Duke nodded. Indeed, cavalry is very important. But as far as I know, the entire National Guard has no cavalry unit. Where are you going to get cavalry? Are you going to ask the old army stationed in Verdun? What the Duke said was indeed true. Cavalry is expensive and takes time to develop. Therefore, all the cavalry in France are from the Old Kingdom army, and the National Guard has 0 cavalry. Lafayette did think about hiring the hussars of the Kingdom Army to become the cavalry of the National Guard. However, most of the hussars are Hungarians. They think that their employer is the king and look down on the National Guard composed of trousers. As for the cavalry composed of French people, most of the cuirassiers are nobles, and most of the lancers are also of aristocratic origin. Although the dragoons are known as infantrymen fighting on horseback, most of them are either rich or noble. The main skill of riding a horse is that, except for nomadic peoples, only the leisure class can play with other ethnic groups. Ning, a leather worker, can ride a horse, which will attract a group of people inexplicably surprised. In short, it is a bit difficult to let this group of people join the National Guard composed of trousers. No wonder the Duke wondered where Ning would find cavalry. Ning, indeed, it is probably impossible to borrow the army's cavalry. However, there is a cavalry unit that I think we can try to borrow. The Duke, which cavalry unit? Her Majesty the Queen's Knights Guard. Those girls are also cavalry. If they are just used for reconnaissance missions, it should be enough. Don't you think His Majesty the King would like to show his presence now? The Duke's mouth opened into an O shape. Are you talking about Christina and the others? Sometimes I really think that you are quite whimsical and dare to think of anything. Ning, don't you think this is the most feasible way to get cavalry under the current circumstances? The premise is that your Majesty can really be convinced by you. The Duke hesitated halfway through his words. Damn, His Majesty is probably scared to death when he sees you, and he dares not say no. Since you are going to find His Majesty, you should leave quickly. I wish you success. If you borrow the cavalry, remember not to send my daughter to dangerous places. Ning, don't worry, I won't really let a group of noble ladies charge into battle. I can't afford any mishaps when they charge. Then, I'll take my leave. Ning stood up, bowed to the Duke, and then backed out of the room. As soon as he left, the Duke snorted, "Humph, you're asking me for money and your daughter again. You'd better remember your investment in me this time to suppress the rebellion." Chapter 91. The cavalry consisting entirely of noble ladies is coming. Ning rushed to the Tuileries Palace from the royal palace without stopping. In normal times, it would be wishful thinking for a commoner to see His Majesty the King without notification. But now the situation has changed. Since Louis V was dragged to Paris by the people last October, he seems to be a little afraid of the people and has PTSD. He met with representatives of the people every other day in the Tuileries Palace, and behaved very amiably. As a result, because of this amiability, Louis V's reputation among the people quickly reversed. Ning learned this by chatting with his artillery. It seems that in the history of the other side, before Louis V fled, his reputation among the people was also slowly recovering. That's why some critics commented that Queen Marie, who instigated Louis V to flee, made a bad move. If the king had stayed in Paris honestly at that time, he might have been sent back to the center of power by the perverse actions of the big capitalists represented by the Pei Yang faction. Back to the point, it was very easy for Ning to see Louis V now. After arriving at the Tuileries Palace, she just needed to ask the guards to report. At about 8 o'clock, the royal butler of the Tuileries Palace led Ning into Louis V's study. When Louis V saw Ning coming in, he stood up and greeted him. "Mr. Frost, why are you still in the Tuileries Palace so late?" As he said this, the king put on a smile on his face, as if Ning was the one with a higher status. In fact, if you think about it carefully, you can understand why Louis V has this attitude towards Ning. After all, Ning has taken the lead to show power to the royal family again and again. In June last year, he took the lead and said no one can let us leave unless we use bayonets. In July, he conquered the Bastille, and in October, the angry people almost killed the king, and he came to save the king again. Looking back at the whole of 1789, if it was someone else, Louis V would also be afraid of Ning. So now Louis V was smiling along, as humble as Ning's butler. If the queen was present and saw Louis V's expression, she would probably make many contemptuous remarks about her husband. "Ning, it's nothing serious. You should know that I'm about to set out to lead the way for the troops to suppress Quinta. Louis V, I heard about it. I wish you a successful battle. Don't worry, I'm telling you something. My troops have artillery and infantry, but no cavalry. In modern warfare, an army without cavalry is equivalent to a blind man." Louis V said oh and suggested earnestly, "Then let Lafayette provide you with cavalry." Ning, don't worry, I was just about to say it. Lafayette has no cavalry either, and the entire National Guard has no cavalry. Then, It's no use for you to look for me. Louis V looked embarrassed. After I let the Flanders army withdraw last year, I had to get the approval of the National Assembly to mobilize all the troops. Without the approval of the Parliament, I can't command anyone. And Ning, who are you trying to fool? You can obviously still command General Bouillet's troops in eastern France. General Bouillard, a staunch royalist, sent troops to meet Louis V when he fled, preparing to raise the banner of rebellion and start a full-scale civil war as soon as the king arrived. And Ning, didn't General Bouillard show that he was very loyal to the royal family? Your Majesty should be able to mobilize his troops, right? Louis V was shocked and couldn't even stand steadily. He held on to the chair next to him and barely stood up. What are you talking about? I dare not mobilize the army without the approval of Parliament, absolutely not. Don't talk nonsense, it might destroy the mutual trust between me and Parliament. Understand, mutual trust. And Ning was secretly shocked, thinking that Louis V was indeed a coward. If he had been a little tougher, the progress of the French Revolution would not have been so smooth. And Ning, I didn't say that. The whole Parliament knew that General Bouillet was loyal to the monarchy. Some even said that he was a close friend of Monnier, who fled abroad not long ago. Monnier was originally the leader of the Parliament's monarchy faction, but he was frightened by the enthusiasm of the Parisian masses last October and advocated stopping the revolution and immediately restoring the original order. As a result, he lost power. After losing power, he hid abroad. It is said that he recently fled to the exiled court of Louis V's brother. Louis V said with a serious face, I don't know about these rumors, and they have nothing to do with me. If you want cavalry, it's no use looking for me. I don't have cavalry, not a single cavalry. And Ning, no, Your Majesty, you do. Where? Louis V looked surprised, as if he knew something extraordinary. I also have a cavalry unit. And Ning, the Queen's Guards are cavalry. Louis V, what? This. They are just ceremonial soldiers. It's almost the same to ride on horses to scout. Your Majesty, after you move to the Tuileries Palace, you don't need so many ceremonial troops. These young ladies are doing nothing all day, so why not let them be of some use? Think about it, the royal family sends its own guards to join the rebellion suppression force, which will definitely become a hot topic in Paris. And Ning persuaded again and again. Louis V hesitated, this. And in the process of going out to suppress the rebellion, the Parliament will bear the military pay of the girls, which can save a lot of expenses. Louis V raised his eyebrows, is that so? Will the Parliament bear the military pay for the rebellion? Of course it will. Although the payment is made with assignats, it cannot be said that the Parliament has no burden. As for whether Ning will pay the borrowed cavalry with crowns of silver coins, of course not. After all, these cavalry are all noble ladies, and the concept of money should be relatively indifferent. The crowns that Ning wants are used to maintain the morale of the infantry. Louis V hesitated for a few seconds and sighed, I have to discuss it with the Queen. After all, they are the Queen's Guards. Ning, you are the king, you can't always care so much about the Queen's opinion. That's right, that stupid woman has a lot of bad ideas, Your Majesty. Of course Ning didn't say that directly. Louis V shook his head, no, I still have to ask the Queen's opinion. Don't you revolutionaries always say that you should respect women's opinions? Ning was unable to refute for a moment. Louis V, anyway, I will ask the Queen's opinion today and give you an answer tomorrow. Ning curled her lips, okay, Your Majesty. Then I will leave first, and I wish you a good dream tonight. Louis V's mouth twitched, and he muttered, how can I have a good dream after seeing you? Good man, I have become the nightmare of the King of France. Ning pretended not to hear this, took 2 steps back, saluted, turned around and left the room. As soon as he left, Queen Marie opened the door to the bedroom and came in. This vampire. He drove us out of the Palace of Versailles. He took away our palace, and now he wants to take away our guards' knights as well. Queen Marie said viciously. I hope the rebels will defeat him this time and cut him into pieces. Louis V comforted, okay, anger is the natural enemy of beauty. What do you think of what he said? I think, sending the guards out in exchange for a good reputation is a good deal. The Queen glared at Louis V angrily, are you crazy? My guards are all ladies from good families, real daughters of gold. How can I let them go to war? This. At this moment, Christina, who had been standing behind the Queen, spoke, wait a minute, Your Majesty, Your Highness. Let me say something. Although we are only a ceremonial force, we have also received a full set of cavalry training in Brienne. We have been training in Brienne for 5 years. 5 years. Serving as guards in the palace over the years, we have never neglected the practice of horsemanship and cavalry tactics. I think we can take on this responsibility. The queen turned her head and stared at Christina. You want to go to the battlefield so much? I think it will be very beneficial to the royal position for us to participate in the suppression of the rebellion at this time. Christina met the queen's gaze and answered with her head held high. Queen Marie pondered for a few seconds, and suddenly sneered. Do you think I don't know that you and the cobbler's son are having an affair? He got the Legion of Honor by saving you. Christina, I do have a personal relationship with Andy and Mr. Frost, but my speech now is entirely for the sake of the royal family. Queen Marie, don't mention that man's name. I feel sick when I hear his name. Call him that insect. Christina, sorry, I can't call my friend that. Queen Marie pursed her lips and stared at Christina for a long time. At this time, Louis V came over and reminded her softly, this is the daughter of the Duke of Orleans. We still owe him a lot of money. I know. The queen said unhappily, then she waved her hand, forget it. If you want to go, go. It would be best if the rebels kill you and the cobbler's son. Chapter 92, Captain. The next day, the king announced that he would send the royal guards to participate in the rebellion. Then at noon that day, about 200 royal guards arrived at Ning's manor on the outskirts of Paris. Christina led the way. This manor was her father's property. She herself had lived here for a period of time, so she brought her sisters here with ease. When the cavalry arrived, Ning was in the yard receiving the silver coins sent by the Duke. Andy! Christina shouted as soon as she entered the yard, we are here. We are here so fast. Ning raised her head and looked at the cavalry entering the yard. The 200 cavalrymen drove into the yard in a mighty manner, and their momentum was quite strong. Is he your dream lover? Asked the cavalryman behind Christina. He's not as handsome as I imagined. Christina turned around and said coquettishly, who told you he was my dream lover? He's my benefactor. Without him, I would have died in northern Germany. Yes, yes. The cavalry girl said perfunctorily, he's my benefactor, he's my benefactor. Ning looked carefully at the girl who was talking to Christina. This girl had long flaxen hair tied into a ponytail at the back of her head. Her skin was white and rosy, so tender that you could squeeze water out of it, and her emerald green eyes were as beautiful as gems. She was a beauty of the same level as Christina. Ning, Christina, won't you introduce your friend? Her name is Clarice, the daughter of the Count of Bath. Christina replied, she is the deputy captain of our cavalry unit. Deputy captain? Then who is the captain? Of course it's me. Christina turned over and dismounted, then saluted Ning. Commander, your cavalry unit is here to report to you. Ning smiled and said, don't call me commander. Have you ever seen a commander with only the rank of captain? You clearly captured the Bastille and saved the king in Versailles. Why don't they give you a promotion? Christina asked puzzledly. Ning raised her eyebrows. Maybe it's because I'm the son of a shoemaker. As soon as she finished speaking, Clarice joked, then you can marry the Duke's daughter, so that your identity becomes the Duke's son-in-law, which is also a noble. You can go to the personnel bureau to register. Ning, I don't want to. This lady obviously doesn't understand that in the current situation, the identity of a shoemaker's son is more useful than the Duke's son-in-law. Clarice, but you're still a captain and can't be promoted. Ning shrugged, whatever. At this time, Fanny came out of the main building of the manor, so Ning called her over loudly, Fanny. Arrange accommodation for the cavalry ladies. They will live in the manor before setting out to quell the rebellion. Fanny, sir, the manor doesn't have so many houses to accommodate so many noble ladies. Christina hurriedly said, Fanny, don't bother, we are used to military life, let us live in the servants' room. Clarice, actually, as long as there is a place to take a shower, we don't care too much about these. Take a shower? No problem, please follow me. Fanny said. Ning, then you guys go take a shower and settle down. I have something to do in the city. Christina asked in confusion, what are you going to do? Ning smiled and said, make some small preparations for the anti-rebellion trip. At this time, several artillerymen behind Ning finished loading the silver coins. Captain, the silver coins have all been loaded. Got it. Ning turned around and waved, then said to Christina, I'll leave first, you guys can do whatever you want. Christina looked at the carriage with several boxes of silver coins behind Ning in confusion. Okay, you go and get busy. And Ning jumped in the carriage and patted the driver on the shoulder. Let's go to the National Guard camp. Arriving at the military camp where more than 1,000 people were assigned to be stationed, and Ning saw Sergeant Russell in front of the building, now a second lieutenant, and Lieutenant Russell was chatting with several soldiers in front of the building. The second lieutenant didn't see Ning at first, but just looked at the carriage that drove into the camp gate with a strange look on his face. As soon as Ning jumped out of the car, Russell stood at attention and shouted, "Commander." Ning, just call me Captain. I'm not used to calling me Commander. Captain. Ning curled her lips. Forget it, just call me Commander. Russell, assemble the troops immediately. Yes. Assemble the troops immediately. Russell saluted, turned around and ran towards the building. A moment later, a large number of National Guard soldiers in blue clothes poured out of the building and began to line up in front of Ning. After about 10 minutes of noisy and chaotic, the team finally lined up. Although the speed of this line is not as fast as that of college students in military training, it is a huge improvement compared to before. Obviously, the non-commissioned officers promoted by Ning from the direct artillery team played a role. Russell stood at the front of the queue and reported to Ning, "Report to His Excellency the Captain, the National Self-Defense Forces Anti-Insurgency Task Force has assembled." And Ning nodded, "Not bad, better than before. It seems that my newly promoted non-commissioned officers have performed well." And Ning paused and continued, "I asked everyone to assemble today because I am preparing to give you special subsidies for the anti-insurgency operation." As he said that, he jumped directly onto the carriage behind him, opened the silver coin box on the carriage, and poured a box of silver coins onto the carriage's floor. The clattering sound of the silver coins made the soldiers' eyes widen. At first, some people who squinted their eyes and were obviously deserting their posts also perked up and looked straight at Ning on the carriage. Ning, the reason for giving you this subsidy is that in the rebellious area we are going to, the locals may not recognize the certificate, so I will give each of you 1 crown of silver coin, so that you will have money to spend when you arrive in the rebellious area. As for what you buy with the silver coins, I won't ask. This is a special subsidy for you. You can use it as you want after it is handed to you. Remember, this subsidy is provided by the Duke of Orleans. There is still money given by the Duke, which is mainly used for the expenses of the troops in the rebellious area. When we come back, if there is any money left, it will all be given to you." The soldiers cheered together. Then Ning winked at Lieutenant Russell, and Russell shouted, "Long live the Captain! Long live the Captain!" The soldiers shouted together. And Ning, okay, let's start handing out silver coins, 1 to each person, keep order." Lafayette was in his office, looking at Ning who was handing out coins on the playground, and muttered, "Relying on handing out money to boost morale, huh? It's useless. This group of rabble will collapse when it's time to collapse. I've seen it in America." At this time, someone knocked on the door. "Come in," Lafayette said loudly. His adjutant opened the door, saluted and reported, "The soldiers are watching Mr. Frost handing out money. It is obvious that this move of his is very popular with the soldiers." "Lafayette, loyalty cannot be bought with money. Don't worry about it." The adjutant hesitated for a moment, and then said, "Recently, military salaries are paid in certificates. The soldiers are very dissatisfied. Some taverns do not recognize certificates. Are there any taverns in Paris that do not recognize certificates?" "Which tavern?" "Let the municipal authorities close it down," Lafayette said with a frown. The adjutant, "This. I'm not sure," the soldier said. "There are." "Then you ask clearly. Those who do not accept certificates are definitely not patriots. Paris cannot allow such people to exist," Lafayette said firmly. The adjutant curled his lips and changed the subject. "Some soldiers also asked whether we would also hand out silver coins when we go out to quell the rebellion. We have no plans to go out to quell the rebellion yet." Lafayette paused, then suddenly laughed. "Troops, tell the soldiers that we will also give them money when we go to quell the rebellion." Anyway, the main force of the National Guard had no intention of going to quell the rebellion, so it didn't matter if they wrote a blank check. The adjutant, "I understand, I'll go tell the soldiers now." After that, the adjutant saluted and backed out of the room. Lafayette continued to stare at Ning who was distributing money through the window. "I don't believe that you can eliminate the rebels with this mob and the fancy cavalry you asked from the king." Chapter 93, Expedition. After a few days of hard work, and Ning finally set out with his small army. At the front of the team was the cavalry led by Christina, followed by an infantry unit of more than 1,000 people, and finally the artillery and baggage train. And Ning rode a tall brown horse on the dirt slope beside the road, watching his troops pass by in a mighty manner. Not to mention, just looking at the military appearance, it looks quite real. And Ning thought. 7 days after leaving Paris, and Ning's troops approached the rebellious area. That morning, Christina suddenly rode a horse to see Ning in a hurry. Andy, come quickly, the scout cavalry found something. And Ning, don't call me Andy in the army, call me Captain. Okay, Captain, follow me quickly, we found something bad ahead. And Ning nodded, led the way. Christina turned the horse's head and kicked the horse's belly, making the horse gallop. And Ning also kicked the horse's belly and followed Christina's pace. Someone in the infantry marching next to him whistled, Captain, are you going on a date? The sergeant walking next to the queue said angrily, shut your mouths. The road is so dusty, aren't you afraid of getting dust when you talk? And Ning himself was not arrogant. In the past few days since the departure from Paris, he has become a good brother with his soldiers. In the past, the soldiers called him captain with respect and fear, but now it is more of a joke. After passing the head of the infantry, and Ning caught up with Christina, drove side by side with her, and then asked, what did you find? Now that the infantry can't hear you, you can tell me. Christina said with a stern face, some bad things, you will know when you get there. I don't want to say it, because I will feel sick when I think of that scene. And Ning, how can you not want to say it? Your cavalry is my eyes, and you have to scout the situation for me. Tell me, what did you see? Christina was silent for a few seconds, and then she reluctantly said, I saw. The rebels hanged the patriots on the trees on the side of the road. The men cut off their penises, and the women cut off their vaginas. They were all naked. Christina cried, and tears rolled down her cheeks, it's so miserable. It's so terrible. And Ning said seriously, okay, I know, you don't have to say it anymore. Soon, he saw the cavalry girls gathered in front. They gathered under an old banyan tree, and the tree was hung with more than a dozen patriots' bodies like fruits. Just as Christina said, these bodies were treated cruelly. There was a sign hanging on the tree trunk, written in blood, this is what every revolutionary bastard deserves. And Ning came under the tree and looked up at the bodies. A foul smell forced him to cover his nose. Christina, let's put them down and bury them. But Ning shook his head, no, let them hang here. Christina, Andy. And Ning was determined, not only will I let them continue to hang here, I will also let every platoon stop under this tree, and then have people read the blood words on the tree trunk aloud. Christina glared at Ning, what did you say? You actually want these poor ladies to be seen by so many people in their ugly state? I want my soldiers to know what kind of enemy they are going to face. And Ning said firmly. Christina, just for this. Follow the order. And Ning ordered, take your troops and continue to scout forward. I want to know where the rebels are. This is the most important thing, find them. Christina pursed her lips, wiped the tears from her cheeks with her hands, and replied, I know. Sisters, follow me. As she said that, she kicked the horse's belly and galloped away, as if she wanted to leave this terrible place as soon as possible. The other female knights ran past Ning one by one. They all looked at Ning with strange eyes, as if they were looking at a cold monster. And Ning was under the tree, enduring the stench, waiting for her troops to come up. Soon, the troops appeared at the end of their sight and drove towards this side. When the first row arrived under the big banyan tree, everyone's face showed horror. Someone else whispered, my God, this is too cruel. And Ning shouted, everyone, stand still. The troops stopped, and everyone's eyes were all on Ning, wondering why he asked the troops to stop at this place. And Ning pointed at the bloody words on the tree trunk and said, this line of bloody words was written to us by the rebels. It says, this is the fate of every revolutionary bastard. The soldiers were immediately in an uproar. And Ning, remember this line of words. Now, march, march. The troops began to march again. And Ning could feel that the troops' pace was more angry than before, and the forest of bayonets seemed to sway more neatly than before. In this way, every time a row came under the tree, and Ning would read the bloody words loudly, and every time a row took another step, it would be more angry. This angry army was destined to teach the rebels a lesson. That night, and Ning's troops camped in a place called Kapini. Christina and Clarice, who were scouting, All came back and summarized the information they had scouted to Ning. The number of Counter's rebels was not as many as the legend said. According to the scouting situation, the total number of rebels was about 3,000, with no artillery and no cavalry. The rebels were stationed about 10 miles away from Kapini. They had just robbed the patriots in the nearby town, slaughtered the cattle and sheep in the nearby villages and towns, and had a big party at the station. After summarizing the information, Ning pointed to the field between Kapini and the rebel station on the map. Is it all open fields here? Christina: yes, it's all open fields. There's a barn and several families here. Christina picked up the bread on the table and broke off a piece and placed it on the location of the barn on the map. There's a large apple orchard next to it. And Ning nodded. I understand. Let's meet the rebels here tomorrow. Clarice was shocked. Meet the rebels? Aren't we the vanguard for the main force? I thought you would keep a distance from the enemy until Lafayette's main force arrived. And Ning shrugged. I did think so. But the enemy situation has changed. The enemy has only 3,000 people, no cannons and cavalry, and most importantly, from what you said, the enemy's military discipline is lax, looting and slaughtering everywhere, and the combat effectiveness of such an army is worrying. But we are different. After what happened today, our soldiers are all holding back their anger. I think we can give it a try. And Ning paused and said, if your reconnaissance is true, then either the rebels have split up, or the National Guard of Libreville was defeated and slaughtered by these 3,000 enemies. Christina, you only have a little over 1,000 people. 1,500 people. And Ning corrected, but I have a cannons and cavalry, and our morale is high. Anyway, I think we can give it a try. If we are defeated, the enemy has no cavalry anyway. And Ning did not continue. The party did not say was, if we are defeated, we can still escape on horseback. Chapter 94. Encounter in the Apple Grove. That morning, Henry, the leader of the 1st Regiment of the Black Army of the Counter Rebellion, got up early and kicked the woman who slept with him last night out of bed. The woman screamed. Henry said angrily, don't make noise. I drank too much last night and have a severe headache. Get out of here. The woman asked in confusion, what? I told you to get out. The woman immediately ran to the door in a hurry. Because she was too nervous, she tried several times before opening the door, and then she ran away. Then Henry's deputy pushed the door in and said, Boss, what do you say today? Need I ask? Keep robbing the patriots. Henry grinned and showed a mouthful of uneven teeth. These patriots dared to target God's servants. They must be followers of Satan. We have to rob all their money to redeem their souls. The deputy also laughed. Ha ha ha, well said. Take all the men's money and let the women serve God's servants. The rebels were in the name of the Holy See, so they were naturally God's servants. Henry sat up and said as he put on his clothes, call all the brothers. Bring what you can scrape and go to the next town. Is there any town in nearby that we haven't been to? We haven't been to Kapini yet, it's not far from here. Henry frowned and thought for a while. Kapini, I remember, there is a mill owner in that place, his wife is very beautiful. Let's go and see, if he is a patriot, we will rob him and sleep with his wife. If he is not a patriot, then put a tricolor badge on his forehead. Henry said rudely, and the deputy and several black soldiers outside the door also laughed. Henry stood up and waved his hand. Okay, stop laughing, gather the troops, and clear the way. The deputy immediately saluted crookedly, turned around and ran out of the door. A moment later, more than 3,000 black soldiers gathered. This group of people did not have a military uniform. They just put some black cloth on their bodies to deal with it. Now, because they had robbed a lot of clothes and jewelry from the patriots and put them all on, the whole army looked even more messy. They didn't look like an army at all, but more like a group of bandits. Henry got on the stolen carriage and ordered loudly, everyone, follow me, we're going to the next town to make a fortune. After that, he waved the whip, and the old horse pulling the carriage slowly walked. The soldiers of the Black Army followed the carriage, singing a tuneless song loudly as they walked. The residents of the town hid in the shadows of the buildings, watching the arrogant Black Army leave their town. Although their eyes were full of anger, they dared not show it. After all, those who dared to express their dissatisfaction yesterday were all labeled with a tricolor emblem and hanged on the old tree at the entrance of the village. Henry was sitting in the carriage, swaying and a little sleepy, so he handed the reins to his deputy, took a comfortable posture and took a nap. Suddenly, the deputy exclaimed, "Look! What is that? Henry opened his eyes slightly. What are you yelling about? Look how scared you are. The deputy pointed to the front. No, boss, look. It seems to be the National Guard over there. Henry turned his head to look at the direction the deputy pointed to, and saw a barn in the distance. Next to the barn was a bush. He didn't know if it was apple or some other tree. In front of the bush, there was a blue column, and the tricolor flag was fluttering in the wind. Henry raised his eyebrows and slapped himself hard on the face to wake himself up quickly. Then he laughed. Ha ha ha, there are only a few National Guards. We can disperse them with a charge. Come on, form a formation. Hurry up and form a horizontal line. In a flash, there was a flash of light on the blue line of the National Guard. At the same time as the sound of the artillery came, there was also the sound of shells tearing through the air, and several shells fell around the road. The shells that fell to the ground bounced up again, jumping several times on the mud like skipping stones. One of the shells just passed through the Black Army lined up in a column on the road, just like a bowling ball hitting a pile of pins, knocking down a large area at once. The rebels immediately fell into chaos, and someone shouted loudly, "The Self-Defense Army has cannons." I know the Self-Defense Army has cannons. Henry said angrily, get off the road quickly. Line up in a horizontal line. A horizontal line can reduce casualties caused by shells. You line up in a column, aren't you looking for death? The shells will jump over and directly pierce you like meat skewers. As he spoke, the second round of artillery fire came again. This time, all the shells flew away, and none of them hit the rebels, but the sharp whistling produced by the shells tearing through the air still caused a huge impact on the rebels. Many people just lay on the ground, covering their ears and screaming. Henry got angry and drew out his long sword. He killed a screaming rebel with one blow and roared, "Calm down. Line up. Damn it, line up. Captains of each team, do something." The captains of the rebels, equivalent to non-commissioned officers, began to urge everyone to stand up from the ground and line up on the road. Henry continued to order, "Military musicians. Where is the military band? Play the drums for me. Calm them down." As he said that, he rushed to a military musician, pulled the guy up from the ground, and knocked on his drum with his hand. "Play the drums for me, do you hear me?" The musician nodded and began to play the drums tremblingly. Just at this time, the third round of artillery fire came, and this time another shell luckily passed through the rebels' queue. Because it passed through the part of the horizontal queue, this shot only broke the legs of 4 people. But the screams of these 4 people drowned out the voices of the captains who were organizing the queue. The black soldiers around the fallen man were so scared that their faces turned pale. They looked down at the bloody legs of the fallen man and their feet were almost unstable. At this moment, someone shouted, "They have cannons, we can't win." "Henry, damn it, who said that? Shoot him. It's just a cannon, I saw a lot of it in the 7 Years' War. Line up. Even if the shells hit, they can only kill a few people." As soon as the voice fell, a shell hit the stone slabs on the country road, and the iron ball of the shell broke into 2 halves, and then passed through the Black Army line still on the road. The screams overwhelmed Henry's shouting. This shot knocked down more people than the 3 rounds of artillery fire combined. However, because the shells broke into small pieces, there were actually only a few people killed, and the result was that the number of people screaming increased greatly. Henry said angrily, "I told you to get off the road and disperse the horizontal line. You didn't listen. Now it's over. Captains, those who screamed will be shot. Those who ran away will also be shot. Line up." As soon as the voice fell, the adjutant shouted, "Boss. Look. The Self-Defense Army is advancing." Chapter 95 Self-Defense Forces, Forward. And Ning rode a horse and stood beside his army. At this time, he felt a bit like playing Mountain Blade. In Mountain Blade 2, riding a horse and wandering in front of your army is almost the same feeling. However, there is no prop called a monocular in the Mountain Blade series. And Ning took the monocular and carefully observed the chaotic enemy. It seems that the enemy was suddenly bombarded while marching in a column, causing chaos. It should be said that the enemy's non-commissioned officers are quite capable. In this state, they can barely form a horizontal formation. It's a pity that the foundation of the rebels is too poor, resulting in a strange state of the rebel troops. The rebels close to the rebel leader have already left the main road and formed a horizontal formation, but the rebels far away from the leader are still in a column state. If the rebel leader rides on a horse, runs back and forth in front of the team, and kicks the butts of those slow rebel soldiers, it is estimated that the team can still be transformed into horizontal formation. It's a pity that the bearded rebel leader did not ride a horse. Obviously, the carriage he was riding in also had horses, so he could just untie the horses from the carriage and ride on them. But the bearded leader chose to stand on the carriage and give orders. He probably couldn't ride a horse. At this time, Christina next to him suggested, "The enemy is in chaos. At this time, using cavalry to charge will probably end the battle. And Ning, you only have 200 cavalrymen. Isn't it a bit too much to think that you can break through 3,000 people?" Christina pursed her lips. The collapse of morale has nothing to do with the number of people. "No, I want to choose a more secure way. Don't worry, I will let you charge, but not now." As he said that, Ning gently kicked the horse's belly and made the horse trot. He turned the horse's head and let the horse run in front of the infantry column in small steps, running all the way to the end and turning back, and finally stopped in the middle of the team. When he ran for the first time, Ning thought he would hear cheers, but he didn't. The infantry just looked at him strangely. The reason why Ning had this fantasy was because he remembered the scene in the movie Napoleon, where Napoleon rode past the infantry on horseback, and the infantry would be in high spirits and shout "Long live." Facts have proved that this was the treatment only Napoleon had. And Ning, you have seen it too. The enemy was bombarded and fell into chaos. Now is a good opportunity to attack. Don't be afraid just because the enemy seems to have more people than us. They are just a mob of 3,000 people. They are no match for us at all. I bet they can't withstand a volley of our guns. After saying that, Ning drew out his sword and waved forward, "All troops, forward." Just at this time, the artillery team fired a new round of artillery fire. The military band was the first to respond, beating a tight drum beat. Then the non-commissioned officers shouted loudly, "Everyone, forward." The non-commissioned officers' orders were passed one by one, like an echo, all the way to the other end of the apple orchard. The blue queue shook for a moment, and then rushed forward like a huge wave. Ning rode his horse to make way for the troops. When he got to the side, Christina came up to him and said, "You don't let me attack, but let the troops advance. Considering the training level of the self-defense forces, is this appropriate?" Ning pointed to the enemy's ranks in the distance and said, "Look at the enemy's situation. The enemy's morale will collapse after the first wave of volleys." As soon as the voice fell, a shell landed in front of the enemy's ranks, splashing a handful of dirt, and then a large number of enemies fell. Ning couldn't see the bouncing shells at this distance, he could only see the enemies falling down. "Ning, look! In a while, the artillery will be able to blow them up." Christina, "Well, indeed." At this moment, Ning saw that his infantry had changed the original horizontal column into a convex V-shaped formation, and a group of people in the middle ran very fast, pulling down the people on both sides. Ning couldn't help but hold his forehead. "I knew they couldn't march in line." Christina teased, "It's better to let my girls charge, at least we can march in line." Ning, "Forget it, it's enough to deal with a group of rabble." After saying that, Ning closed his mouth and watched his troops approach the enemy in an increasingly ugly formation. At this time, the enemy was even more confused. The bearded leader ran back and forth along the team, desperately kicking the rebel soldiers with his feet, trying to make them line up. When Ning's troops walked halfway, the rebels couldn't help but start shooting. Christina, "Shooting at this distance, it's not a volley, it's impossible to hit anything." As soon as the voice fell, more rebels opened fire. Ning could already imagine the rebels' non-commissioned officers, if there were any, cursing while stopping the soldiers from firing. The white smoke from the firing gradually covered the rebels' lines, and the white fog produced by the artillery firing at this time, the entire battlefield was shrouded in white fog, and the vision became very poor. Ning could barely see that his troops had advanced to a place 50 feet away from the rebels. "Ning, why don't they stop and shoot?" "Christina, are you sure you have designated a commander to attack? The commander must give the order." Ning slapped his head hard, "Damn, I didn't designate one." In his field of vision, the blue battle line formed into a convex shape and pressed towards the enemy. Ning cursed and said to Christina, "It's too late to give orders. Change the tactics. Cavalry, follow me." After that, Ning kicked the horse's belly, making the horse gallop. He raised the long sword in his hand high and rushed towards the enemy. Seeing this, Christina also drew her long sword. "Girls, follow. Clarice, let's follow the noble killer. Charge." 200 cavalry followed and Ning rushed out of the apple orchard and killed the black army that was still in chaos. The rumbling sound of horse hooves was like thunder. At this time, Lieutenant Russell was leading his troops to advance towards the enemy. He looked at the distance of the enemy and couldn't help mumbling, "Should we stop shooting?" Lieutenant Russell didn't realize that he was now the highest-ranking person in the infantry team that launched the attack, so he didn't think of ordering the troops to stop shooting. Although he really thought they should stop firing. Suddenly, he heard the rumbling of horse hooves from behind. He looked back and saw Ning and the girls of the cavalry team rushing over from the side of the queue. Russell's head was hot and he shouted, "The boss is charging. Let's go too. Everyone, bayonet charge." When the military band next to him heard it, the musicians immediately played an exciting drum beat. The non-commissioned officers also shouted with Russell, "Charge! Kill!" Then, stimulated by adrenaline, the soldiers also shouted, "Kill! For freedom!" More than 1,000 people held their bayonets and rushed towards the black army that was already in chaos. At this time, the black rebels could not see the enemy in front of them because of the smoke produced by the shooting. In this situation, suddenly there was a deafening shout of killing from the other side of the smoke, which was quite scary. Then something even scarier happened. The blue-clad soldiers rushed through the smoke with bayonets in hand, like ghosts in a literal sense. The morale of the black-clad soldiers collapsed at this moment. At first, only a few people retreated in fear, and then the entire front began to run away, as if fear was contagious. Henry roared, "Don't run. Fight. We have more people than them." At this time, cavalry appeared on the side of the black-clad soldiers. So the retreat turned into a rout, and soon everyone started to turn around and run. No matter how many people Henry killed, it was useless. Henry, fuck. They are just a bunch of rookies who can't even march in a line. However, at this time, the blue-clad self-defense forces had already rushed in front of Henry. "Henry, I am a soldier blessed by God." Shit. The cold bayonet pierced his stomach. Fuck. Henry was about to speak when several more bayonets pierced his stomach. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96 After Victory. At this time, Ning encountered the same problem as when he played Mount and Blade. The sword was too short and he couldn't cut anyone on horseback. He rushed towards the scattered enemies with the girls. The girls passed by the enemies from behind and slashed them with their swords, and the people fell. He passed by the enemies from behind, and the enemies continued to run away as if nothing had happened. He ran behind several people in a row, but he didn't cut anyone down. Finally, he got angry and wanted to knock someone down with his horse. As a result, the horse stood up when it saw that it was about to hit someone, and almost threw him to the ground. Ning calmed the horse in shock, and watched the girls who had already surpassed the front and wantonly cut and killed the scattered enemies, and cursed fuck. If it was in Mount and Blade, he would have taken his usual long crescent-shaped sword long ago. Because he couldn't cut anyone, Ning didn't urge the horse to run wildly, but let the horse trot freely and stroll on the battlefield. He saw the blue self-defense soldiers driving the black soldiers like sheep, stabbing them to death in the field with bayonets. Some black soldiers raised their hands in surrender, but were still stabbed to death by the angry blue soldiers. Obviously, seeing the hanged patriots before made every National Guard soldier full of anger. This was a revenge, and the National Guard soldiers wanted to use killing to respond to the enemy's brutality. Christina and Clarice turned back and came to Ning. Christina smiled and said, "Congratulations, you won a clean victory." And Ning nodded, "Nothing, the enemy has no artillery and cavalry, it is natural for us to win." Clarice, although there was a small mistake. This small mistake naturally refers to Ning's failure to designate an attack commander, which caused his troops to notch it before the charge. And Ning, it's a minor problem. We can improve it next time. At this time, Lieutenant Russell ran over and saluted Ning. "Captain, we won. We defeated the enemy who is much larger than us." And Ning, "Yes, we won. What you need to do now is to stop the troops from chasing the enemy and gather the troops, so that they won't be scattered." "Understood, Captain, I will go to gather the troops. In fact, many of them can't run anymore. You see, many of them have stopped to rest." Russell said, pointing to the blue-clad soldiers who stopped to rest not far away. "I saw it. Go quickly and gather the troops." After that, Ning saluted Russell, and then turned to Christina. "Take the cavalry to continue to drive the enemy. I want to make sure that these enemies can't gather again and disperse them completely." Christina saluted. "Yes, Captain." After that, she kicked the horse's belly and galloped to the cavalry team that stopped not far away. Clarice did not immediately follow her captain, but took a few steps forward on her horse to get closer to Ning, and said with a smile, "I can feel that Christina is very happy today. She is different from us. Most of us joined the army because our families did not have money to give dowry, but she really wanted to be a figure like Joan of Arc." "And Ning, Joan of Arc? It happens that she is the daughter of the Duke of Orleans and also an Orleans girl. Clarice, it's a pity that this victory was not commanded by her. Most of the reputation of the victory belongs to you. Congratulations." "And Ning, I just launched an attack when the enemy was most vulnerable." Clarice grinned, did not answer, but galloped towards the cavalry. After Clarice joined the cavalry, Ning's female army turned around and set off, chasing the fleeing enemy. Ning stayed where she was and watched them go away. At this time, Russell came over and reported, "Captain, we found a lot of property on the enemy. Do you want to confiscate these properties?" Ning pondered for a few seconds and made a decision. "These properties were looted by the enemy from the local people. We have to return them to the local National Assembly. You, go get a carriage and let everyone hand over the looted property and pile it on the carriage." "Russell, what if everyone doesn't hand it in?" "If they don't hand it in, let them do it." "Can we force them to hand it in?" Ning said. "We can't have too high expectations for the consciousness of the soldiers in this time and space. But it is definitely not okay to rob the dead and prisoners at will. The military discipline of such troops must be extremely poor." So Ning's approach is to pretend and tell the soldiers that this is the army, but not to investigate it. This is also a helpless compromise. After gathering the troops, leave a company to clean up the battlefield. We will camp in the village ahead and have a celebration banquet tonight. The news that the National Self-Defense Army won a great victory was spread throughout the Kinta area by the defeated soldiers. At one time, every tavern in the Kinta area would have one or two people who were said to be the defeated soldiers of the Black Army. They vividly described the scene of the Blue Devil sweeping the holy warriors of the church. "Let me tell you, they took a drug called free sugar, and they became invulnerable to swords and guns. We were clearly firing all the time, and the white smoke from the shooting filled the horizon, but they were unharmed. They passed through the white smoke of the shooting and pounced on us like hungry wolves, with evil red light in their eyes. As for the number of the self-defense forces, it was magnified more than 10 times. We were walking on the main road. Just after we turned over a hill, we saw tricolor flags flying everywhere. Under each flag was a battalion, no, a regiment. Tens of thousands of self-defense forces, hundreds of cannons. The whole earth was shaking when they fired. And there were also blue cavalry. When the cavalry ran, the whole wilderness was filled with the sound of horse hoofs. A few days later, the whole of Canton knew that the main force of the National Guard of Paris had come to quell the rebellion, and the small groups of black soldiers roaming around all over the place all ran away. A large number of black soldiers gathered around the city of Kinta, trembling. Anyway, Ning's small force had walked to a place less than 20 miles away from Kinta, and did not encounter the Black Army. On this day, Ning arrived at a small village again. The farmers who were working in the fields at the entrance of the village ran back to the village as soon as they saw the tricolor flag. Ning was puzzled, so he urged his horse forward and entered the village first. The people in the village were busy closing their doors, and only a boy was standing on the side of the road eating his fingers. "Ning, child, why are the adults so scared?" The child answered in a baby voice while eating his fingers, "Because One-Eyed John is back, and said that the devil with the tricolor flag is coming to retaliate against us." "Are you a devil?" Ning looked back at Christina, who was catching up. As the captain of the cavalry, Christina was usually accompanied by a flag bearer and a bugler who played the cavalry bugle. The flag bearer waved the bright tricolor flag. "Well, although we waved the tricolor flag," Ning said to the child, "we are not demons." At this time, a peasant woman in a dirty patched linen dress rushed out, picked up her child and turned around and ran away. The child was still saying to his mother, "Mom, they said they are not demons." SHH. The peasant woman looked back in fear. "They are patriots. We hanged the patriot master in the village before, and they came to retaliate against us. With that, the peasant woman hid in the house with a child in her arms. Christina, it seems that we are not welcome here. And Ning curled her lips. It seems that the people in the city participated in the action of hanging patriots. In other words, they are not patriots. We have already penetrated deep into enemy territory. This is not good. After that, he turned his horse's head and galloped out of the village. Christina immediately followed. What's wrong? We may have gone a little too far and should have retreated to the last city that supported us and played it by ear. Chapter 97. The main force of the rebels attacks. The Black Army defeated by Ning was only a part of the rebels in the Konta region. Now the rebels in the entire region were frightened by the prestige of the National Guard and ran to the core city of the Konta diocese. As a result, a large number of rebels gathered in Konta city. These rebels were all led by Colonel Gallup Donald. After summarizing the information from various places, Colonel Donald came up with a bold guess. The enemy is likely to be just a small force. Although it is fully equipped with artillery and cavalry, the total number of troops is not large. The colonel asserted to the rebellion masterminds in the Konta region, Archbishop Hart of the Konta diocese, although we don't have artillery and cavalry, we have 6,000 infantry. We can win with our superiority in manpower. Although Ning defeated 3,000 rebels in the Battle of Apple Grove, he actually killed only a few hundred rebels, and with the wounded, it would be good to have 1,000. The remaining 2,000 people were scattered. Although Ning sent Christina's cavalry to chase and kill the fleeing soldiers, Christina only had 200 cavalrymen and could not kill many. Most of the scattered Black Army gathered in Konta and came under the command of Colonel Donald. Together with the various rebels that were originally scattered everywhere, Donald now assembled 6,000 rebels. And it was different from the rebels in the Apple Orchard battle. At that time, the rebels had been looting for a while, and their military discipline was lax and their fighting spirit was low. The rebels who gathered now had a decent military discipline because they were watched by the priest. After all, most of the rebels were conservative farmers, who were relatively pious and embarrassed to be too much in front of the priest. Bishop Hart of Kanta said with a straight face, "Are you sure? Recently, rumors about the enemy are flying everywhere. It is said that their commander is a famous noble killer in Paris, and the troops they brought are also the meritorious troops who captured the Bastille. Their cavalry is the French King's Guard Cavalry Regiment. It is better not to underestimate the enemy." Colonel Donald snorted, "I have asked, the so-called French King's Guard Cavalry Regiment is actually the Queen's Guards. What use are a bunch of girls? When we win, we can give the captured noble ladies to the soldiers as rewards." Bishop Hart frowned. "What are you talking about? How can we do this?" "Okay, then we will give the noble ladies to the soldiers in a place where the priests can't see." Donald shrugged. "You will go to hell." Hart cursed. "I am a soldier fighting for the Lord. Logically, we should go to heaven." Donald said, "My soldiers believe this, so they stand up against those patriots." Bishop Hart pursed his lips and did not answer. At this time, someone knocked on the door. "Come in." Donald turned his head and looked at the door. The door opened, and Donald's adjutant came in and saluted. "Colonel." Several civilians said they were from Gaodang in the north of the city. They said that the army with a tricolor flag arrived there this morning, but several officers turned around and left after entering the city to take a look. "Donald, call them in, I want to ask them in person." A moment later, two villagers, a man and a woman, were brought into the room. As soon as the villagers entered the room, they looked timid when they saw the cardinal, and they crossed themselves devoutly and bowed their heads. "Hart, don't be so reserved. Colonel Donald has something to ask you." The colonel stepped forward. "Look at me. Are you sure you saw the army flying the tricolor flag?" "Yes, sure. The flag is the tricolor flag, and there is a round badge with 3 circles on the hat. The officer also brought 3 beautiful ladies with him." "Hart, that's right. It should be them." The colonel raised one hand to signal the bishop not to speak, and asked, "Did you see how many people there are?" The male villager looked at the sky. "When they came, I was working in the fields outside the city. As soon as I saw them, I lay down and let the wheat block me. I saw that their queue was not very long, and there were several carriages in the team." "Colonel, it's the baggage train accompanying the artillery. How many people do you estimate they have?" The male villager hesitated for a while, and said with an embarrassed look, "I don't know either. Looking at the length of their team, I think there are at least 1 or 2,000 people. But I'm far away, and I can't estimate it clearly. Don't blame me if I'm wrong." At this time his wife stepped forward and spoke, "Mr. Colonel, Bishop. It's terrible. The leader of the Blue Devil came into the village and went straight to my child. He wanted to eat my child." The colonel hesitated when he heard it. "Going to eat your child?" "Oh," the female villager said emotionally, "of course. Otherwise, what can they plan to do? My son is only 4 years old. How can they catch a 4-year-old child and question him? They must want to eat my son. This bunch of godless demons." The colonel frowned, suppressing his desire to complain, and asked the female villager, "So, you saw the leader of this group of self-defense forces directly?" "Yes, he is not tall, and he doesn't look like a noble and educated lord at all. It's obviously a war, but he brought 4 women with him." The male villager pushed his wife's shoulder. "Don't talk nonsense. I heard from old George that those are female knights sent by His Majesty the King, and each of them is like the Orleans girl." "What female knight?" "I think she's a mistress." "Mr. Colonel, my good Mr. Colonel, their leader is like this. They will never be able to fight well. You should deal with them quickly. Don't let these demons bully us." The colonel coughed. "Okay, I got it. You guys go down." The female villager, "Mr. Colonel, deal with them quickly." The male villager tugged at his wife's sleeve. "Okay, let's go. Didn't you hear Mr. Colonel asking us to leave?" "What are you pulling?" "I'm talking to Mr. Colonel. You're really useless. When the demon in blue clothes wanted to eat our son, I was the one who went out to pull our son back, and you just hid in the ground. I was just scared." The 2 villagers left the room while bickering. The colonel sighed. It seems that the self-defense forces from Paris did reach within 20 miles of Kinta. Heart, so what are you going to do? Donald was silent for a few seconds, and looked as if he had made up his mind. "I will lead the troops to attack. The enemy has artillery, so they will definitely move slowly. Our troops can solve the accommodation problem on the spot, and we will definitely be faster than the enemy if we attack lightly." After that, he raised his voice, "Someone come here." Immediately a lieutenant opened the door and came in. "Colonel, gather the troops and prepare to attack." The lieutenant was a little surprised. "Attack? The enemy's army is approaching. Shouldn't we defend the city?" "Damn it. Where is the army coming from?" "The enemy has at most 2,000 people. We must go out today and teach them a lesson." Chapter 98: How to quickly and efficiently eliminate 4 times as many enemies. As for Ning, as soon as he found himself in the enemy area, he immediately ordered the front team to become the rear team and ran away. Christina was confused and asked, "Why are you running so resolutely? Shouldn't we take advantage of the momentum of the great victory and defeat the enemy in one go?" The real reason why Ning turned around and ran was that he didn't want to fight the enemy head-on without confidence. After all, he only had less than 2,000 troops. It was not a big problem to fight 3,000 unprepared enemy troops with preparation, but if both sides were prepared, the situation would be different. But Ning couldn't say it directly. After all, it would be a bit embarrassing to admit that he was scared. So Ning answered like this, "You don't understand. When fighting in places where the masses support us, the masses will tell us the enemy's movements, and at the same time conceal our army's movements from the enemy. This is equivalent to the battlefield being transparent to us. But in places where the masses tend to be conservative, the situation is the opposite. So we can't fight the enemy in areas where we don't have a mass base." In fact, Ning's words were not original, but he paraphrased what a great man mentioned in his summary of experience. After listening to this, Christina showed an expression of admiration. "You are so cautious. I'm sorry, I didn't think enough. However, the enemies have been scared away by us. Do we really need to worry about these?" Ning, "They didn't run away, but gathered together. If I'm not mistaken, there should be a large number of enemies in the center of the rebellion. It will be very dangerous to be caught in a decisive battle in the wild." Christina smiled and said, "Don't worry, with our reconnaissance, you won't suddenly encounter a large group of enemy troops in the wild. Ning, I'm counting on you." Christina gave a thumbs up. "Leave it to me." 1 day passed. Colonel Donald suddenly pulled the reins and made the horse under him stop suddenly. The horse neighed and raised its head, and finally stopped after a few hoofs. Donald jumped off the horse and carefully examined the ruts on the road. The captain following behind him asked puzzledly, "What's the matter, Colonel? What do you think this narrow rut is?" The colonel pointed to the ruts on the ground and asked. The captain looked down and looked embarrassed. "This? I can't quite tell. It's artillery." Only 2 ruts of artillery will be so close, because the artillery is narrower than the horse-drawn carts used by farmers to transport grain. The ruts are still new, and the enemy has just left. The colonel mounted his horse. Order the troops to speed up. We will soon catch up with them. If we can catch up before their artillery is deployed, we will win a great victory. As soon as the voice fell, the captain of his subordinates shouted loudly, "Colonel, look over there." Colonel Donald turned his head and saw a group of cavalrymen coming out from the bushes in the distance. The first 2 cavalrymen did not carry flags, but the 3rd cavalryman who turned around the bushes was carrying a tricolor flag. Donald cursed, "Damn it." In any case, the enemy commander, the noble killer, is knowledgeable and knows to send out cavalrymen for reconnaissance. The cavalry squad that turned around from behind the bushes also stopped when they saw the large army here. The riders walking in the front stood up on their horses, straightened their backs and looked over here. Donald's subordinate, the captain, asked, "There are not many of them. We can go over and eliminate them on horseback." "Don't be silly, although they are just a group of ladies, they have been trained by Brienne's cavalry. They were merciless when they killed our army outside the apple orchard before." The colonel shook his head. At this time, the small group of cavalrymen in the distance had turned around and ran back along the way they came without looking back. "Colonel, now we don't have the advantage of a sneak attack. Let the troops speed up. Run forward. The scout cavalry will not be too far away from the main force. It is estimated that the enemy is only a few miles away from us. Run. As long as the enemy does not abandon the artillery and baggage, we will definitely catch up." A moment ago, Christina rode around the edge of the bushes and turned her horse's head to see the troops marching in the distance. "Oh my God!" she muttered, pulling in the reins to stop the horse. The female cavalrymen following her pulled the reins one after another, and for a moment, the entire cavalry was in temporary chaos. Christina stopped her horse, stood up on the horse's back, straightened her body, and held up the monocular telescope. "Christina, what should we do?" the subordinate asked nervously. "The enemy is in a marching formation. If we rush up and kill now, we should be able to achieve good results." Christina scolded, "You are crazy. The key now is to bring the intelligence back immediately. Andy's brigade has not gone far, and they still have heavy artillery vehicles. If the enemy starts to speed up and catch up now, they will soon catch up." After saying that, Christina stood up and pulled the reins, turned the horse's head, and then swung the whip on the horse's butt. The horse immediately broke into a run. With superb skills, Christina stood on the horse and rode the horse at full speed. The other cavalry followed him and retreated all the way. "Andy!" And Ning heard a shout from behind, and when he turned around, he saw Christina standing on the horse, riding the horse and galloping like the jockeys of later generations, with her body almost parallel to the horse's body to reduce wind resistance. But because Christina's chest muscles were very strong, this action would greatly highlight her figure, so that Ning could see the white color from such a long distance. "Wow, that's really big," Ning thought without any tension. Then at this time Christina shouted, "The enemy is not far from here." Ning was completely stunned. "What the hell?" I turned around and ran as soon as I found that I had entered the enemy area. How come the enemy caught up with me after running for a whole day? Are the enemies so fast? At this time, hearing the enemy approaching, the marching column was a little chaotic, and many people stopped and looked at Ning with guns. Seeing this situation, Ning simply raised one hand and shouted, "Everyone, stop moving forward." Lieutenant Russell immediately followed and shouted, "Stop moving forward." The non-commissioned officers relayed the order, "Stop moving forward." The team stopped. Ning turned his horse's head to greet Christina. When Christina stopped in front of him, the horse ran too fast and stood up directly, so the girl posed in the pose in Napoleon's famous painting. "Where are the enemies?" Ning asked. "In the direction we came from. We can see them by galloping for about 20 minutes. Ning opened his mouth wide. "Isn't this very close? Clarice, who set out early in the morning, should have found them. Why did you only find them when you set out?" "I don't know, maybe Clarice and the others have been caught." Christina swallowed hard. "What should we do?" Ning scratched his head and looked back at his troops. The troops have artillery, and if they move with the artillery and ammunition trucks, they will definitely not be able to escape. It seems that this battle must be fought. "How many enemies are there?" Ning asked. "I don't know. I see that the marching column is very long. If compared with our marching column, there may be 6,000 people." Ning, 6,000 people? Not counting the cavalry and artillery, there are only 15,000 infantry on my side, a fourfold difference in manpower. It would be better if the artillery and cavalry were included, a threefold difference in manpower. At this moment, Ning wanted to abandon his troops and go for a retreat with Christina, since he had horses. But if he went for a retreat, his reputation would be gone. But if he didn't, the difference in manpower would be there. If his troops were the old guards of the late Napoleon period, he could try to fight 1 against 4 and rely on high morale. The problem is that his troops are a mob that is not much better than a mob. Even the grassroots non-commissioned officers are privates who were promoted on the front line before the expedition. Ning was shocked. He really had no idea, so he thought about taking a look at the terrain. Maybe he could use the terrain to turn decay into magic. He straightened up and scanned the surrounding terrain. Speaking of which, Ning always felt that this terrain was a little familiar. Yes, it feels like the awesome map of Normandy in the game Hell on Earth, with fences made of low shrubs everywhere, and the vision is terrible. Are all the French plains like this? Ning recalled the scene of fighting in Hell on Earth. At that time, he liked to play the machine gunner, lying on the ground and shooting through the hedges, killing many Allied soldiers. Ning turned his head and looked at the road where his brigade stopped to rest. There happened to be a hedge made of shrubs next to it. Christina patted Ning on the shoulder. Speak, what should we do? The enemy is coming soon. Ning, dear Christina, what do you think is the easiest way to use 1,500 to fight 6,000 people? Christina looked strange. You ask me. Ning smiled. At this time, he was no longer panicked. He even had the leisure to lower his eyes and look at Christina's chest muscles. They were really strong. 9 years ago, she could still pretend to be a man, but why is she so strong now? Christina was so anxious. Why are you looking at my chest? It's time. Don't be impatient. Have you figured out my question just now? No, tell me. You'll know after you watch me perform. Ning turned around and ordered the artillery, move the ammunition carts and cannons forward, move them to the end of the bushes, and throw them in the middle of the road. Christina, are you going to abandon the baggage and run away? How could that be? These cannons are my treasures. I won't give up on them. All infantry, go into the bushes. Hide behind the bushes, lie down, don't let anyone see you, and stand up when you hear the sound of standing up. Also, check your muskets and make sure they are loaded with ammunition and can fire at any time. Christina opened her mouth wide. You are ready. Ning interrupted her. You also have a mission. You take the girls back, go to the enemy, maintain visual contact with the enemy, and keep wandering in the distance of the enemy's sight. Go. Christina smiled. Yes. Chapter 99, Catching a Turtle in a Jar. After Christina left to harass the enemy, Ning commanded his artillery to throw the guns and ammunition trucks in front of the ambush area, just blocking the road. After moving to the position, Ning personally loaded the last gun in the row and pointed the muzzle at the road. After firing, the shells will roll along the road and break everything they touch. The reason why they did not load shotgun shells is that the shotgun particles are relatively small and have little kinetic energy, so they will stop after penetrating a few people. Although ordinary solid projectiles may not kill a few people when they just come out of the muzzle, they will immediately cause a lot of casualties when they roll along the road. The most important thing is that shotgun shells can only hurt the first few rows of the enemy team, while solid shells can roll through most of the team. The death of people far in front of the team and the people next to you being broken into 2 parts are a huge blow to morale. If Ning wants to win, he must hit the enemy's morale. Inflict enough damage to the enemy in a short period of time and break the morale of the opponent, and this battle can be won. After all, the number of enemies is 4 times that of Ning. After loading the cannon, Ning said to the artillerymen, I need a warrior to hide on the ammunition cart and get off the ammunition cart to fire the cannon when the enemy approaches. The cannons of this era needed to be lit with a torch, unlike the later cannons that only needed to pull the rope of the breech block. As for the torch to light the cannon, Ning lit a baggage cart and pretended that he was running away and wanted to burn the baggage but didn't have time to burn it. The torch was inserted into the burning baggage cart and it was completely invisible. After arranging everything, Ning began to recruit warriors to light the cannon. I need a warrior to hide here now, Ning pointed to the hiding place on the cannon cart and said to the artillerymen, when the enemy approaches, you will jump up, pick up the torch on the burning baggage cart behind, and light the loaded cannon. Whoever completes this feat will receive a levered gold coin. As he said this, Ning took out a gold coin, raised his hand high, and let the gold coin fall in the sun. The glittering golden light immediately made several artillerymen raise their hands. Ning chose the bravest one based on his memory, and stuffed a 1 kroner silver coin into his hand first. This is a deposit. You will get gold coins after completing the task. The artilleryman did not take the silver coin immediately, but said worriedly, "What if the enemy rides up to check first? The convoy parked on the road is so obvious." "Don't worry," Ning comforted, "I have ordered the cavalry to harass the enemy. Even if they have riders, they will not risk being intercepted and killed by our cavalry to check. Take your silver coin and be bold." "Don't worry, Captain." The artilleryman who took the silver coin vowed, "I will wait until the enemy is closest before firing. Watch me." Ning nodded, then he jumped on his horse, dragging a large branch cut from the bushes with one hand, and galloped along the road in front of the artillery, erasing all his footprints. While wiping his footprints, he gave a loud order, "Listen for some noise later. When you hear the sound of the cannon, get up, take a step forward through the bushes and shoot at the enemy closest to the muzzle in front of you." Ning almost wanted to say the sight, but halfway through he realized that flintlock rifles these days don't have sights at all, because the hit rate of flintlock rifles is too touching, and there is no need to aim at all. According to the standard flintlock firing process, you have to close your eyes when firing at the end to prevent the burning sparks and the medicine pool from jumping into your eyes. After doing all this, Ning rode his horse around a little ahead and tied the horse behind another hedge. Then he returned to his army on foot, walked to the center of the team, and drew his long knife. He glanced at the soldiers lying in the haystacks on both sides. The soldiers all looked at him straight, looking very nervous. "Ning, don't worry, follow my deployment, we will return with a great victory." After that, Ning took a step forward and hid next to the bushes, almost blending into the tree trunk. At this time, Christina was carrying out the task of harassing the enemy, using her sight. Her cavalry team remained in the enemy's field of vision, maintaining a distance that the enemy could see clearly, but just didn't continue to approach. At this distance, Christina carefully identified several horses in the enemy's ranks and confirmed that they were not Clarice's horses. That's strange, where did Clarice go?" As she was talking, the flag bearer of the team shouted, "Tina, look over there." Christina looked in the direction of the flag finger and saw a small group of cavalry appeared behind the enemy. Looking at the flag, it was Clarice. Christina muttered, "Damn, this guy, didn't he get lost after setting out in the morning?" The fields nearby were full of hedges, and it was indeed easy to get lost if you turned the wrong corner. Christina waved desperately at Clarice, wanting her to come over, and the two of them joined forces to continue to complete the task assigned by Ning. But for some reason, Clarice didn't come over and kept following behind the enemy's ranks. Even if Christina ordered the bugler to blow the cavalry assembly call, Clarice didn't come to join. On Clarice's side, she saw Christina waving at her from afar. "The boss seems to be waving." The female knight in the team spoke, "Should we bypass the enemy's main force and join them?" Clarice was shocked. "No, she will definitely scold us. After all, we are lost. We just stay here and keep a distance from the enemy. We are ensuring that the enemy marches according to the captain's intention. This is a very important task." Female knight, this. It's a very important task. But the assembly call has been blown over there. Can I pretend that I didn't hear it? Obviously not. Really not. Okay, everyone, let's go and join Christina, and no one is allowed to mention that we are lost. No one is allowed to mention it. On Colonel Donald's side, his adjutant suddenly shouted, "The cavalry behind us has begun to speed up. Do you want the troops to form a square formation?" Donald angrily said, "Damn it. There are only so many cavalry, what kind of formation is it? If these women dare to charge our formation, we will pull them down and give them to our brothers to have a good time with. Don't worry about it, move forward." Although he said so, the colonel was still paying close attention to the enemy cavalry that was speeding up and overtaking. However, his worry was in vain. The cavalry behind accelerated just to pass the Black Army and join the cavalry in front. After the two cavalry joined together, they formed a small unit of 50 riders. Strange, the enemy's cavalry should not be so few. Donald muttered. Adjutant, maybe they were sent to scout in various directions. Yes, it's possible. Donald nodded. The enemy cavalry is staring at us so closely, It should be close to the enemy's main force, forward. If we defeat the enemy, we will have a celebration banquet tonight. At the colonel's urging, the black soldiers accelerated their march. After about 40 minutes, the colonel saw carriages and cannons parked on the road ahead, and a carriage was ablaze with flames. Donald was overjoyed. In order to escape lightly, the enemy abandoned the baggage wagons and cannons. Go forward quickly, go up to put out the fire, and rescue the cannons and baggage. Chapter 100 When Trees Can Talk. The baggage carts thrown on the road achieved better results than expected. The enemy soldiers in black ran along the road and rushed up. And Ning maintained a state of integration with the trees, waiting for the start of the artillery fire. At this time, he suddenly thought of something. The French also fought Vietnam. Should we teach these trees to speak Vietnamese? Maybe they can scare people to death across time and space. The Black Army began to enter the ambush area, and Ning's voice was also raised, fearing that any mistakes would be discovered by the Black Army. Several Black Army leaders riding tall horses passed by Ning's ambush position. But they did not leave their team too far. It should be the same as Ning expected, fearing Christina's small cavalry team watching from a distance. Ning looked through the leaves at the guy who might be the enemy leader. That guy should be a nobleman, and judging from his rank, he should be a colonel. There are many officers and non-commissioned officers in the Black Army. These noble lords have been sent to the gallows by peasants in other parts of France, but they are still officers in the church as rebels. Ning saw that the enemy colonel stopped not far from the burning baggage wagon, and he must have felt that something was wrong. But he did not give the order for the troops to stop advancing. Nearly half of the black team entered the ambush circle. Ning's ambush formation was a double-row horizontal column, and the enemy's marching column was a four-way column. With the same number of people, Ning's formation should be twice as long as the enemy's. But because the enemy had more people, the current situation was that the enemy's marching column was much longer than Ning's ambush area. It was physically impossible for all the enemies to enter the ambush area. Ning thought that the situation was almost there and it was time to open fire, but the warrior hiding next to the artillery still did not move. Is he afraid because he saw the enemy approaching? No. At this time, the enemy leader was very close to the roadblock left by Ning, and he might be able to see that the artillery blocking the middle of the road was loaded. Damn, warrior, fire. Ning was as anxious as an ant on a hot pot. Colonel Donald approached the baggage train parked in the middle of the road. At this time, he had already discovered that only one car was burning, and it was located at the back of the abandoned caravan. It looked like the burning car was deliberately used to block the line of sight. Moreover, the cannon across the middle of the road had completed the action of unloading the car and was deployed in a firing state. If the enemy was fleeing in a hurry, would they have time to do such a thing? The colonel vaguely felt that something was wrong. If this cannon had been loaded with shotgun shells and fired at the road at this time, thinking of this possibility, the back of the colonel's head went numb. At this moment, he saw something moving on the baggage train behind the cannon. It was a person hiding in the baggage train. This was a trap. In a hurry, the colonel took out his pistol, but the pistol at this time could not be fired immediately after it was taken out. He had to pour gunpowder into the ignition pool first. Without this step, even if you pull the trigger to make the flint produce sparks, you can't ignite the gunpowder in the barrel, unless the spark passes through the small hole between the powder pool and the barrel and falls on the gunpowder in the barrel. This probability is not much higher than the probability of getting an SSR in a single draw in the mobile game. The colonel hurriedly took the gunpowder pot to pour gunpowder into the pistol powder pool, and shouted at the same time, "Stop him! Stop him!" But everyone else was confused, and some people didn't even see the man who climbed up from the baggage cart. Donald looked at the bad guy in ambush desperately as he picked up the torch from the burning baggage cart. It turned out that the car was lit to hide the torch. It was not to burn all the baggage at all. The enemy is so cunning. The colonel threw away the gunpowder pot and raised his pistol. As he pulled the trigger, the ambusher lit the fuse of the cannon. The sound of the cannon drowned the sound of the pistol shooting. It's over, the colonel thought. I'm going to be hit in the face by the shotgun. However, what came out of the muzzle was not a shotgun, but a solid iron ball, which drilled into the black-clad army column running on the road next to the colonel. In the blink of an eye, a row of people fell in the column. This was a 12-pound infantry gun fully loaded with powder, and the shells could break a person's leg as easily as breaking a straw. In just an instant, There were hundreds of one-legged unfortunates in the black-clad army column. Screams instantly rang out in the entire team. "My legs! Mom!" And Ning shouted with all her might, "Everyone stand up. Raise your guns." As he shouted, someone had already moved first. After all, everyone was very nervous at this time, and hearing the sound of the cannon was like touching a taut spring, and they started all at once. Suddenly, a blue line appeared in the bushes, and countless guns were aimed at the black-clad soldiers on the road who were in chaos due to the bombardment. In this situation, there was no need to order to fire. The soldiers who were extremely nervous pulled the trigger as soon as they raised their guns. The crackling sound of gunfire rang out. The row of shrubs on the roadside seemed to have suddenly turned into a bunch of smokers, blowing smoke at the black-clad soldiers on the road. This time, the black-clad soldiers on the road were blown down. And Ning couldn't see these from his main perspective, because the smoke from the volley was too big, and the vision was wide, and the enemies close at hand could not be seen. But the wall of smoke was not soundproof, and Ning could hear the screams clearly. My goodness, with these overwhelming screams, you don't need to see to know that the enemy's morale has been hit hard like a firewood being drained from the bottom of the pot. But it's not over yet. At this time, you have to continue to cause casualties to the enemy in order to completely break the enemy's morale. So Ning waved his long sword and rushed into the smoke, shouting as he rushed, "Kill! For freedom!" The deafening shouts of killing were set off by his roar, "For freedom! Long live the citizens!" The blue-clad soldiers were full of momentum, and rushed through the white smoke like a tide with their bayonets. There was no need to choose a target at all. The moment you rushed through the smoke, you would see the dense queue of the enemy. The only thing that affected the killing efficiency of the first round of this charge was that many bayonets chose the same target. Some people stabbed the enemies who did not fall down after being shot. It is said that a military doctor in the Napoleonic era did a study and found that 70% of the bodies on the battlefield were killed by bayonets. In short, the killing efficiency of the bayonet charge is much higher than that of the volley gun. In just 1 second, the enemy suffered nearly 1,000 casualties. Combined with the previous artillery bombardment and volley guns, the enemy suffered nearly 1/4 of casualties in an instant. Even the regular army could not withstand such a high instantaneous casualties. The collapse of the enemy's morale was just a matter of a moment. The enemies in the ambush area decided to turn around and run almost at the same moment. Seeing this, the enemies who did not enter the ambush area also turned around and ran. And Ning didn't care about whether the enemy's morale collapsed at this time. He was busy chopping and killing the enemy. He had already chopped down the 4th enemy, and the lapel of his blue military uniform was full of blood spurted out by the enemy. "Kill! Kill!" He mechanically repeated his shouts, completely dominated by adrenaline, and became a pure slashing machine. "You know, I am the swordsmanship king of Brienne. I have won 2,000 simulated sword fights." And Ning didn't know what he was shouting. At this time, he had already killed his way through the enemy's ranks and rushed to the shoulder on the other side of the road. At this moment, he saw an officer riding a tall horse rushing towards him, with a long sword in his hand reflecting a cold light. It was obvious that this rider wanted to kill Ning. It was the enemy commander. Although the troops had been defeated, the enemy commander was in high spirits. And Ning's mind was blank at this time, and his whole body reacted on its own. He imitated the action of the protagonist played by Mel Gibson in the American movie The Patriot. He picked up a black army flag on the ground, used the flagpole as a spear, and stuck one end into the ground, then knelt on the ground alone. The sharp head decoration of the flagpole pierced into the horse's chest. The horse fell, throwing the enemy on horseback into the mud. And Ning stood up, rushed to the stunned enemy, and chopped off his head with a knife. "Enemy general, I'm going to take off his clothes." Oh my god, what the hell am I shouting? But the universal translation system worked. The blue soldiers around cheered. At this time, Ning suddenly heard the cavalry attack bugle. It was Christina chasing and annihilating the scattered enemies. But it didn't matter anymore. There would be no more rebels in the entire Kolta area. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.